The story opens with a ritual as the chief elder, surrounded by his people, gives a speech saying the gods of the universe have given them the power to fight monsters and reveals the skill tree. He lifts a basket holding a newborn and calls out that Toru has a skill branch called restoration as the baby cries nonstop. Now in another time period, we see the entrance to the goblin forest. A dark-haired man in armor hunts an unknown creature. A tree stands before him. With a dagger in one hand and a long sword at his belt, he swings the dagger at the unknown creature, and after several attempts finally strikes its core and tears it apart. Pulling out the dagger, he sees the blade is warped and realizes the acid has eaten it away. He looks at the sword, confidently activates his recovery ability, and the knife blade straightens back to its original shape. He fills a vessel with dead slime and says the acid already comes from 12 slimes. Suddenly, someone tells him to wait back there. Turning around, the man sees a whiskered, sharp-toothed animal dying before his eyes and realizes magic was just used. The strangers swing straight at him, but he jumps and dodges, and the tree behind him breaks from their attack. After landing, the man looks back, and a blonde hunter complains that he alone wanted to catch him and that some old man ruined his spell. Then the hunter picks up the rest of the beast and asks how he can sell it. Asking about the main character, he should have known that the character always wanders at the edge of the forest to hunt slugs. Angrily, the blonde says he collects nothing but trash. The comrade tells the blonde he is telling the truth and points to his intact armor and weapons as proof he only hunts weak monsters. The blonde man gets angry, calls it a waste of time, and says they should go deeper into the forest to hunt larger game. 30 years ago, the priest and the villagers gave him a skill meant to restore anything, and it was enough to restore the broken knife he had used a moment earlier to destroy the slime core. The skill works only on monster items, so it is useless in combat. For a long time, he could not enter the forest. At the city gates of the border town Dadon, a man spends 2 nights on the brick wall, guarding the entrance. A blonde man with very long hair meets him. Sarcastically calling him an old man, the blonde asks whether he finished collecting dirt earlier. The knight behind them tells him to stop talking like that. The protagonist looks up and shows his badge, and the blonde says he knows the protagonist has shown that G-rank adventurer badge before. The protagonist turns and leaves in silence. The blonde man shouts after him that it's time for him to retire because being a gatekeeper is easier. The blonde lets out a breath. At the adventurer's item evaluation department, the clerk calls the next client forward. The protagonist steps up and hands over the slug acid. The worker picks up the objects with disgust and asks what they are. The protagonist stays silent. The woman asks if he is sure he has the right address, explaining they are evaluating items collected while hunting. The group of comrades with the blonde man suddenly joins them, and he tells her he was wrong, saying a scavenger hunt is still a hunt. They step forward and say he wasted their time on the hunt, so they'll take it. The third comrade tells the second to stand. The moment one of them reaches for the slugs, the protagonist strikes the man in the face and snatches his prey. The blonde attacks him too, but he easily dodges, and she crashes into the worker's counter. The worker panics and shakes after being splashed with acid from the mucus, asking what it is and telling someone to call the guards. Another polite worker approaches, calls the first woman Marika and asks whether she did it again, and Marika turns to the main character and thanks him, calling him Toru. The woman scolds Marika for calling the liquid safe while also warning to be careful. Marika says it's not her fault. The guards take the comrades, Torai takes the slimes, and Torai tells Marika she must clean up here. Suddenly all the slime piles up in the air and flies back into its shell, surprising Marika. A note tells him 1 mole horn and 15 forest slugs cost 95 copper coins. She hands them to him, and he leaves with a bag of money. Toru arrives at the butcher's shop. The vendor greets him and notices the slaughtered animal. Toru stays silent. The butcher lifts the carcass and says it will make skinning easier for him. He asks if he will take half of the meat for himself, and the butcher buys the other half. After a while, the butcher hands him a wrapped package, says it's for him, and then whispers that it's the usual bonus and should be kept secret from the boss. Someone in the audience shouts at the worker to stop chatting and get to work, and the butcher obeys contentedly. At night, Toru slips around the corner with a bag of meat, sits down, and opens the bag of entrails, drawing stray cats to the smell. The cats move up to the food and start eating. Toru pats their heads with a satisfied smile. Then he sees animal eyes in the shadows and feels a little sad that the third one still does not come to him. Standing up, he says he never eats when Toru is around, so he should go, gathers up the rest of the bag and leaves. A third animal slowly emerges from the shadows. At Avril's boarding house, Toru is met by a woman with elf ears and hands her a package, saying it contains horned mole meat. Avril's landlord. She thanks him and says it will probably come in handy. Her face is soft and calm as she wishes him well. Toru goes to his room and lies on his bed. Closing his eyes, he thinks today was no different from any other day and that tomorrow will be the same. His eyes open and he studies the closet. He picks up his badge and checks today's skill points. Surprised, he stands up abruptly when he sees he already has enough control points. He looks toward the closet. Confident and defiant, he approaches the closet and opens its doors. A huge, lifeless doll shaped like a girl, with long hair and a dress, stands in the closet and keeps staring at him without speaking. Toru looks at her with regret and recalls the events from 25 years ago. Followers of the gods of destruction crawled out of the great abyss at the center of the world and attacked his village. They devoured the villagers one by one. They were almost there. The hidden passage to the main road was ahead. A beast lunged at them, but Toru pulled back and killed it. As he rejoiced over this, another monster appeared behind him. Excited, the girl screamed his name. She rushes to him and takes the monster's blow to protect Toru. Toru turns and sees she is shaking and covered in blood. The old man clicks his tongue and uses his power to stop time, freezing everything. The old man turns to Toru and says he has stopped their time and must take her with him. Toru trembles and holds back tears. The old man shouts that she is still alive. Hearing this, hope appears in Toru's eyes. They visit the Temple of Healing. The healer warns the situation is dire. Even the water god Aurelia cannot heal her while the stop skill is active. If the effect is cancelled, she will die immediately. Toru becomes angry and abandons the idea. The old man says there may be only one way to save her. Toru asks him to explain what that is. Grandpa says his recovery skill can save her. Toru does not expect that and looks at him in shock. He shouts that it's impossible, that he can only rewind time by 10 seconds, and that his skill does not work on living beings. The old man says raising his level will change everything. Toru watches his grandfather with interest. He says that reaching level 10 will unlock the power of God because his ability to stop has kept everything the same. Toru shouts that he can still save her. The old man agrees but warns he will have to endure much suffering on the way. Toru says it does not matter because if she survives, he will do it no matter what it costs him. The path ahead was as terrible as the priest had described. Leveling up required killing monsters, but Toru did not know how to fight and could only run. At one point, the gate guard could not look at him. The guard began teaching him how to use a sword, and soon he could hunt. He often saw new players join teams and learn to distribute skill points, and by level 30, he had become a master of dodging and parrying. After saving a child from monsters attacking Dedan City, he lost half the strength in his left arm. Despite the injury, he continued hunting small monsters. Every day from morning to night, it became harder to raise his skill level. Even so, his wish was not guaranteed, and Toru refused to give in. Shaking off his memories, he reaches out to the girl. He pulls his hand back, sits on the bed, and says he needs to level up first. Everyone has a natural skill with trees. The skills in the branches let a person perform many miracles. Mentally, he empties a vessel of 10,000 skill points into the tree. Restoration returns objects used in battle to their original state. He is level 10 and can use the skill 10 times per hour. It activates by blinking at will. Toru realizes the limit on his recovery skill has changed from item to object and clenches his fist. He remembers his grandfather saying he could unleash the god of time's full potential at 10 levels, and the same would be true for his stop. Looking at the vessel in the corridor, he says it left them halfway, but his grandfather's ashes and the stopper remained with him. Approaching the vessel, he opens it and scoops up the ashes. He studies the sand and activates the recovery skill. Nothing happens. He knows the gods of the universe cannot bring back departed souls, as expected. Staring at his injured left hand, memories come back all at once, and he cannot explain why he replayed the moment he heard it, or whether recovery can reach past moments. The tree's fruit shows perception of the time continuum and a precise grasp of how time relates to goals. Panicked, he looks at his hand and feels blood running down his left hand. Clenching his fist, he pulls it toward him. He says he clearly activated it with his gloves so he can use the restoration without touching it directly. His head snaps toward the closet. He stands and puts his hand on her neck where the wound was, silently hoping it will work. Using his ability, he sees many memories of that event. Watching her, he sees no reaction and wonders if it didn't work. She lets out a sound and Toru's eyes widen. Stepping out of the closet, the girl looks around and asks if this is the afterlife. Toru says it is a closet, offers to explain everything, and she asks him to tell her with a smile. He says that when he was a child, his grandfather stopped her time with a stop, and he continued her treatment, but needed a lot of money, so it took a long time, and the girl asks him if his grandfather left them. Toru thinks the girl hesitates and likely does not recognize him, and he smiles as he says restoration would make him the boy he once was, but even with a younger body, he would still be an old man inside. Suddenly, the girl says another boy was there with her. Toru looks away and says he hasn't heard anything like that. The girl says she understands. He thinks to himself this will be better for everyone and touches his face with his index finger. She bursts into genuine laughter, and through it, says he still can't shake the habit of touching his chin when he's lost in thought. Then she tenderly calls him by name. Hearing his name on her lips, Toru says the name Sarah to make sure it is real. Sarah immediately throws herself into his tight embrace, crying with joy. Toru asks her when she first realized he was standing in front of her, and Sarah says she recognized him right away, but Toru, smiling slightly, asks her to be honest, and Sarah insists she is telling the whole truth. She explains she knew about her grandfather's tragic cardiac arrest and was certain it was the key to his recovery and return to them, hoping he would be his former self again. Sarah cuddles closer, buries her face in his chest, and admits she was saddened to learn her grandfather had already died, thanks him for his help, and says she is infinitely happy to have him alive by her side. Toru feels her tremble, gently strokes her head as if she were a little girl, and with a warm smile says he is also very happy to see her, and thanks Sarah for surviving this difficult world. Sarah, holding back tears, says she should in theory be older than him, but is surprised to find he has long outgrown her. Toru agrees, saying that's true and that he is no longer young. Sarah, in tears, says she's amazed at how strong he's become and didn't expect to see him like this. Toru, confused, mutters that she must have imagined it and that he's not at all how she sees him. Toru gently strokes her head to calm and distract her, asks if she's hungry and offers a snack, and Sarah says nothing, just snoring softly with her face buried in his chest. Toru, filled with love, tenderness, and care, looks at her warmly, ready to support and comfort her at any moment. Morning arrives at Uriel's boarding house. The sun rises and a bird sings. Sarah sits beside the sofa where Toru sleeps soundly, watching him and waiting for him to wake. Toru opens his eyes, stands, and pulls Sarah toward him by the chin. She looks surprised. Sarah closes her eyes instinctively and waits nervously for something to happen, but Toru interrupts and says she seems okay. Sarah pulls away and says the landlady said breakfast was ready. Toru says that's how the landlady met her, before he introduced them. Not answering, Sarah shouts to Uriel that Toru is awake. Toru gets up and goes downstairs for breakfast. At the table, Sarah says she's eating for the first time in 25 years. Toru looks at her indignantly, and Uriel smiles and tells Sarah she says amazing things. Toru apologizes to the landlady for bringing someone so suddenly. Uriel says it's fine, they sometimes have to bother each other, and as a former adventurer, she is happy to help the newcomer. Toru watches Sarah eat her breakfast with gusto. Sarah asks Uriah if she can become an adventurer. Toru snaps that she can't even imagine how hard it is. Sarah smiles confidently and says that's why she wants to help Thor. Silence falls and Thor does not answer. Changing the subject, Sarah asks what kind of meat it is. Admiring the flavor, she says it is very tasty. Uriel says she is glad she liked everything. Toru thinks he tried to protect Sora from the village massacre, then worries he might be getting old since everything is new to Sarah now, and watches her happily interact with her new landlady. After breakfast, Toru suggests they register her as an adventurer, and Sarah is immediately happy with the offer. Toru says they need something first, and Sarah apologizes to Uriel. He asks if she can lend her armor until he buys one, saying it won't be for long. Uriel says she hasn't used it in a while and asks if she minds. Sarah cheerfully says she'll take care of it, and Uriel arrives with the armor, saying that, as expected, the robe has yellowed and the breastplate is moldy and rusty, and she asks again if she really doesn't mind. Sarah thanks her happily, and Toru reaches for her clothes and uses his recovery skill. Various memories surface in his mind along with these clothes. After that, the entire armor is restored to like-new condition. Surprised, Uriel asks Thor what it was. Thor explains it was his recovery skill and apologizes if it surprised her. Sarah puts on the armor, Thor admires it, and Uriel says it suits her, as if it were originally made for her. Finally, Toru and Sarah calmly leave the house. Amid a city of people focused on their own lives, Toru and Sarah walk calmly. She scans the stalls and asks if it's a festival today, and Toru tells her to calm down since many people live in this old border town, and the stalls are open every day. At the center of the world, a vast pit called the Black Hole opened, and vapors rising from it spread over the earth like a veil and created monsters, so the land was called defiled, because the monsters made human life impossible. The city served as a buffer, shielding the people from the abyss. Toru explains that long ago an army of monsters invaded but was defeated, and those who fought in that battle gained experience. Sierra asks why there are so few adventurers here. Toru tells her he came here to meet the local adventurers. Stopping abruptly, he tells her she can go from here alone. She turns back, worried, and asks why he is not going with her. Toru tells her not to worry, saying he will watch so his acquaintances do not become suspicious. Sarah hesitates for a second. Then the girl immediately sits down on the ground and groans in pain, saying her stomach hurts badly. She says she thinks she'll feel better if he takes her to that building. Toru looks at Sarah. The pastors turn to Sarah, surprised and confused. Toru exhales and says he will rejuvenate himself this time, and that about 25 years should be fine. Sarah yells at him to wait and tells him he doesn't need to change his appearance. Toru says the people around him don't think much of him and that nothing good will happen to her if she stays with him. Sarah asks if he did something wrong. He says the point is that at his age, an old man like him is still a low-ranking adventurer, and that's not something to be proud of. Sarah shouts at him in indignation, telling him she is proud of him. Quickly, she says she asked the landlady how hard being an adventurer is. Toru keeps looking at her, and she adds that a normal person couldn't last 25 years and that she would have given up already if she were him. Toru asks if it's okay even though he's so old, and Sarah replies that he's a cool old man, so she's fine with it. Sarah grips his hand and pulls him forward. They stand by a board displaying a notice that sorcerers are needed. They need a squad of 3 E-rank warriors. There is an urgent need for a water mage of D rank or higher. Applicants are asked to respond within 2 days. Sarah asks him what it is. Toru says it's a notice board where people can post requests or invitations to join the squad. Sarah says that's interesting and asks Toru if he ever wrote anything, and he replies there was never a need. They meet the same trio, the blonde in front watching Sarah with interest. Sarah and Toru walk up to the worker. She recognizes Toru and notes that he is back so soon. He replies that he is just keeping an acquaintance company. Sarah says excitedly she's glad to meet him, that her name is Sarah, and that she's not an adventurer yet. She asks whether Mr. Toru brought her and what their relationship is. Sarah quickly tells her they are going to get married. He covers her mouth with his hand and says she is from his village, so he takes care of her. Examining the document, the worker says she is only 17. She holds out a ball and asks her to touch it, and when Sarah asks what it is, she explains it is a tool called a soul analyzer that will let him test his skills. She places her hand on the ball while Toru watches closely and notices a branch inside. Toru believes that before they came here, he checked Sarah's skill tree with his time flow perception, which reveals more detail than a normal soul analyzer. Reversal reverses the target's attack or effect at level 1, can be used 5 times per hour, and activates when the user blinks. A worker says the white tree is very rare, and this is the first time she has seen this magic skill reversal. According to her, even in their village, she was the only one who had one when she used it. Attacks bounce back unless they are too fast. Toru remembers the events with a serious expression and connects them to her ability. Sarah interrupts his train of thought and shows him her badge. She says cheerfully that she has the same badge as him and that they are like a couple, and she is pleased to be an adventurer like Toru. Applause breaks out behind them and they turn around. The 3 congratulate Sarah on her registration, calling her baby. The second says it's just in time because they were looking for a girl mage. Someone suggests ditching Old Man Grang and joining their squad, saying they'll show her the ropes, and Toru tells Sarah to go home. The blonde gets angry again and shouts that they did not give the old man their word. Toru easily dodges another punch and lightly taps his shoulder. Immediately, the blonde man loses his balance and falls hard to the ground, his mind clouding, while the people around him panic and shout, demanding to know what Toru had just done. Toru keeps going, repeats the action, and touches 2 more people who pull away. The boys also fall hard to the ground. Sarah watches the scene and looks at him with clear delight and admiration, and Toru turns to her and explains that he returned them to the strong intoxication they had been in before. They leave, and on the way, Toru turns to Sarah and asks whether she really has no objection to what is happening, since there will be more situations like this in the future, and she will have to fight dangerous monsters. Sarah reminds him confidently that she clearly said this morning she wanted to help Thor with everything, and that she's genuinely happy to walk beside him again and enjoy their time together. With a tender hug and a slight smile, she asks whether this is what Toru had been dreaming of, then urges him to tell his sister everything, confident his sister will help him find a solution. Toru looks thoughtfully into the distance and tells her he wants to go far away from all this, admitting that for the past 25 years he has always entered the forest through the same entrance, as if trapped in a vicious circle. Sarah, sounding genuinely concerned, asks whether he regrets how his life turned out, and Toru smiles warmly and replies that he absolutely does not. With a sincere smile, he tells her he still wants to continue as an adventurer, ready for surprises and new discoveries. Sarah reaches out and invites him to join her as a fellow adventurer. That day, the lone adventurer Toru finds a party alongside Sarah. They walk happily into the forest as the sun sets. Toru calmly teaches a frightened Sarah how to enter the goblin forest, pointing his sword down. A horned mole suddenly pops up from the ground, and Sarah points her stick at the monster. Toru hits the mole with a single blow, but it does not die. It burrows into the ground again, and Sarah asks if it has escaped. Toru says not yet and asks her to try using her skill next time if she is ready. Holding the stick, Sarah says she will catch it this time. The mole pops out of the ground again and jumps toward Thor. Sarah examines the mole. Using her inversion ability, the mole crashes into the ground, bleeding. Sarah sees it and asks if it's a horned mole, and Toru confirms, but she overdid it and the horn was destroyed. Apologizing to Toru, Sarah watches him approach the monster and say it's okay and that he'll fix it now. He casts a restoration spell, the horn returns, but he remains dead. Sarah tells him he revived him, but he says that is impossible. Since the soul belongs to the god of creation, he can only restore the body to its state before death. With his knife, he cuts off the mole's horn. Then he uses the recovery skill again, and a horn reappears on the mole's head. Sarah understands and says he does it cleverly. He keeps using the ability to multiply the horns. Toru says their family has grown, so he needs to add a bit to his income. Sarah is happy Toru called her family. They leave together, and Sarah says she was surprised Toru dodged so quickly. Toru says he restores his body at different points in space, and the more he practices, the better he can move. Sarah guesses that's why he touched himself there today. Toru puts his hand on her face. Sarah blushes, not understanding why he's doing this. Meanwhile, Toru checks her ability tree and notices the spatial perception skill. Sora can analyze the target space in detail, and as he thought, her ability to detect the horned mole's movements was far too good, a spatial perception skill, unlike his perception of the time continuum. Sarah stands with her face turned up for a kiss, but Toru just turns away and leaves. Sarah asks indignantly whether that's all. Toru turns and asks what she means, and Sarah walks past him, offended. Toru remembers hunting alone used to take 20 minutes, but now fights last only 3 minutes, and looking around he says they can move deeper into the forest faster than he thought. Inside a hollow tree, they sit with food in front of them, and Sarah is happy it's meat. She bites into the meat with great appetite and eagerness. Her expression changes in a split second, and she shouts that he is salty, making the other animals in the forest turn around. She quickly grabbed a bottle of water and drank greedily as Rue watched, out of breath and smiling warmly. He said you had to cut the dried meat into thin slices with a knife, wrap each slice around the cheese and cracker, then eat it. After he did all this, Sarah said indignantly that you should have warned her. Sarah tastes it and calls it delicious. Toru asks if she noticed anything on the way here, and she says she was surprised how easy it was and that visibility was good, adding that the ivy and branches have been cut back so they're getting enough sunlight. Toru says she noticed, which is good. He explains that the goblin forest next to the city was declared a logging zone, and over time they made safe paths, trimmed the trees, and drove away all the animals. He says there's now a beaten track that leads to the heart of the forest and to the logging sites known for their fine timber. Sarah asks if they are forest orderlies then. Toru says he assumes they are pest exterminators. Drew asks how many experience points are in her water jug. She says she killed 3 monsters, so she figures 3. Drew points out they only get 1 point because the mole and the bird were killed together, so those 2 don't count. He explains that experience is split among the battle participants and rounded down, so she only received experience for the slime she killed before dinner, and asks whether she thinks life is hard. Meanwhile, Sarah believes Toru has spent 25 tough years adventuring for her, and she hugs him tightly while telling him he is really cool. Toru smiles and says he wants to go deeper into the forest today, and she agrees, and he suggests that once their skills fade they search for the goblins who gave the forest its name. Walking through a forest of lush green plants and ancient trees, a sudden sound reaches them, and Toru warns that goblins hunt in pairs or threes to surround their prey, so she must stay alert, which she does. A goblin appears suddenly and growls at them. A second later, he attacks him with his stick. One comes out of the bushes below, and another jumps from the tree. They rush straight at them. Toru effortlessly dodges their attacks and strikes back immediately. He kills goblins one after another, hitting each as he goes. The goblins keep attacking, screaming. He rips out one man's eye as the other jumps aside to dodge his blow. The hero takes an active role in the fight. Sarah joins the fight and kills the goblin. Sarah exhales and studies the goblin corpses, noting how ugly they are up close. Toru hands her a dagger and says they need the right ear first as proof of pacification. She takes the knife and gets to work. Toru instructs you to place your fingers on the neck, just under the jaw, and feel for a hard object. Sarah finds an object and asks whether it is a goblin crystal. Toru praises her, saying she found a mana stone. Tan does not understand. Toru explains the stone is useless on its own, but put into a tool it can be used in many ways. Trading mana stones is one of the city's sources of income. Toru stands and says they should kill as many goblins as they can before sunset. Sarah asks whether he will take the meat with him. Toru says goblin meat is unappetizing, so nobody will buy it. Sarah replies that she understands and finds it such a shame. At last they return to the Adventurers Academy, Sarah walking ahead and happily repeating the story of their big win. The guard at the gate, the same long-haired blonde, tells Thor he's early and suggests he must be tired of picking up all kinds of dirt and thinking about retirement. Sarah interrupts him, says hello, and thanks him for working so hard guarding the gate. He calls her a cutie. When the man asks who the girl is, Toru panics and says it's probably just a coincidence she's walking with him. Sarah thanks him for always taking care of Toru, who stands at the gate looking confused and thinking it's odd that older people have become fashionable. Indignant, the blonde tells Rickon to say something, and when he sees Rickon not reacting, he says Rickon seems frozen and asks what is wrong, and Rickon looks away and awkwardly says nothing is wrong. Toru tells Sarah he will go to the butcher and asks her to go to the appraiser, and she obeys, arriving to find a line and a surprisingly large crowd. She overhears them talking about who they hunted, a group of men going over every detail, one saying this is what happens when you act without thinking, and claiming that if it weren't for him, the other would have died long ago, and the others back him up. Now they focus on Sarah. People call her a cutie. Sarah turns to them, says hello, and apologizes for overhearing their conversation. A guy says it's okay because one of them was speaking so loudly. It's Hank, the guy with the long, dark hair. Sarah says they got it, and the man replies they are experienced adventurers. She says today is her first time out, and he immediately offers her a spot on the team, recommending she join if she is not hunting. A girl from the group, indignant, asks why he is suddenly inviting her to join them. Toru suddenly comes up to them and asks Sarah if she is still in line. A man angrily demands to know why he is cutting in line. Sarah happily waves at him. No one understands, so Toru apologizes and says he is with Sarah. He steps forward, leaving the group baffled. At the counter, the clerk apologizes to Sarah for the wait and asks how her day was. Sarah says it was her first day on the job and she really enjoyed it. Spreading a pile of ears and horns, she says this is the day's catch while the group behind her stands stunned and cannot believe what they see. The worker reviews and lists 2 pacified forest slugs, 5 horned moles, 1 shark beak, 6 fluids and goblins, totaling 21 pacifications, plus the sale of 57 mana stones. She holds out the coins and asks that they be counted and accepted. Toru takes the bag and tells Sarah they are going home. Sarah turns to the group, thanks them for inviting her, and asks them to reveal the secret of killing goblins later. The worker calls them and sees only 4 goblins left to pacify. Each holds out 1 goblin ear. The heroes step out into the street, happy and joyful. Toru gives Sarah a large copper coin and says it's her share. She thanks him and says she doesn't need it because she already has many new things. He says he wouldn't have earned the money without her, and that, as a girl, she still needs many things. Sarah asks if the money is for wedding planning. Toru replies flatly that it is not. She hurries over and invites him to check out the shopping arcade. They walk between the counters as Sarah asks him what he would like to eat. Stopping at a stall, she points to a skewered razor bill and asks about it. The vendor says it comes with honey sauce and tastes delicious. Sarah shouts that it looks delicious and wants to try it, so she buys 3 pieces, surprising Toru. Is she really going to eat all 3 pieces? She says no, holds out a skewer of chashlik, tells him to open his mouth, and he obeys and tastes it. After trying it, Sarah says it's delicious and tender and wonders what it's made of. Toru says it's the same and suggests taking another one to give to the lady of the house. She agrees, and someone warns them that if they eat so much, they won't fit through the door. The owner came up to them. That morning, Toru says he asked the owner to take Sarah somewhere, and Sarah asks if that is why they returned early from hunting. They finally reach a public bathhouse. Sarah says she's never bathed in a big bath before. Toru says he thought she'd be tired after her first outing. Toru can't accompany her himself, so he asked the owner. Sarah says she doesn't mind, so maybe they should go together. Toru was surprised by her remark. Uriel tells her to go in right away. They enter a public bathhouse and see many girls in front of them. Uriel accompanies and says the bathroom is in a particular spot. Sarah runs toward her, carrying her towel. Sitting together in the hot bath, Sarah says it feels nice. From the next room, Toru hears Uriel tell Sarah she can't swim here and smiles. After a while they come out, first through the door, followed by Uriel and Sarah. Thank you for waiting, Sarah. Sarah says the sauna was absolutely amazing on her first visit and brags that her hair and skin are so smooth now. Toru says she was so beautiful, he didn't recognize her right away. Uriel then asks Sam to step aside for a minute to talk. Uriel thinks Sarah only has one outfit, so they end up at the store. The female worker is surprised to see Miss Uro and asks what they're picking up today. Uriel tells her she wants to buy clothes for these guys, says it's a bit hot now, and asks the guys to choose between linen and cotton, and Toru awkwardly says she knows better. The woman offers them some beautiful granite fabric. Sarah asks to see what else they have in the store, and the worker says of course she can. As the worker measures their size, Uro asks when it will be ready, and the worker says she's not very busy now, so it will be ready tomorrow for the young man and in 3 days for the lady. While walking through the store, Sarah suddenly sits up when she notices something, and Toru approaches and asks if something is wrong and if her stomach might hurt. Holding out the fabrics, she asks which is better. Toru says the sky-colored fabric will suit her, and the woman is happy and says she thought so before approaching the worker and asking whether she can buy this fabric for this money while showing the bag. The worker says there are 94 copper coins, and she can only sell a small portion for that price. Toru gives Sarah more coins and asks whether that will be enough, and Sarah asks whether it is possible at all. Toru replies that if he is with her they can earn a lot more, so he should not worry. Sarah thanks him and says she loves him. Finally, Sarah leaves with the headband, and Uriel says she is glad Sarah is feeling better. Toru says Sarah has always been like this and asks if she is causing too much trouble, but Uriel says she is not and that Sarah is like the ones in the stories. Smiling, he asks whether she can see it now. She agrees, saying Sarah shines brightly. On the way, Uriel says they hope everything will work out without extremes. Thor agrees, and Sarah walks happily with a new headband. Deep in the goblin forest, Toru warns Sarah to be careful because a goblin is running that way. Sarah kills goblins one by one with her power, but they never stop, springing out and attacking from all sides. One leaps out from behind her. Toru kills him by driving his sword into his mouth. Sarah watches and sighs with relief. Toru and Sarah have been gathering more each day, making subduing goblins their main goal, and Sarah asks Toru to use her restoration skill to clean the dried blood from her. They find a plant and Sarah asks if it is the bitter herb he had mentioned, and Toru confirms it, saying it is used in a healing ointment and won't grow in the city so it can be sold for a profit. Toru tells her to cut off only the top so it will regrow in 3 days. Sarah is surprised and says that means it can be picked many times if you remember where it grows. Toru says this can only be done now because once summer ends the picking season will be over. They return to the gate. They pass the disgruntled blonde again while her friend watches them with suspicion. Sarah tells Thor they have a good catch today. Thor agrees, saying the hall is big enough to attract unwanted attention. A stranger surrounded by guards watches them. Sarah and Toru keep looking at the important man and his armor. Toru sees a silver plaque on the man marking him as B rank, and the man asks Rikan if it refers to him. Rikan nods and the blonde is offended that he whispered something behind an important person's back. The man tells Thor there has been a complaint that he is exploiting a novice adventurer by posing as a guide and asks him to come with him. Sarah starts to object, but Toru says it's fine and won't last long, and they leave with the blonde trembling with anger at Rikan. Shouting, he says he didn't think he'd report them to security headquarters and keeps speaking to him disrespectfully. Rikan tells Carlos he was in charge as an adventurer, but in this job he outranks him, so Carlos must respect the chain of command and asks whether Carlos really wants him to respect the person who reported his comrade. Rikan looks away and says he was clearly in violation, that the gatekeeper was right to report him, and that he's after dirt so Thor should know his place. Carlos boils with anger, strikes Rikan in the chest and shouts that, unlike them, Rikan has worked hard all his life. Rikan looks down and sees Carlos has no hand. Carlos says he attacked out of envy. Carlos shouts at him angrily, saying that no matter how he looks at it, the only terrible person here is Rikan. Rikan says Carlos has always told him it was time for Toru to retire, and Carlos shouts that yes he says so, but Toru is stubborn as a mule and will never retire. Rikan says it's odd that Carlos is suddenly so protective of him, then he looks away and says it's none of his business. Carlos remembers hunting with Toru, Toru taught him when he was a novice adventurer and knew nothing. He tells Recon he can hardly believe Rank B was involved in this matter and says headquarters must have lost its mind. Sarah, Toru, and the guards approach a special place, and after her question goes unanswered, she asks Toru directly, who says it is an emulator structure supported by built-in mana stones. Surprised, Sarah asks if this is a training ground. The protagonist explains that if her opponents aren't monsters, both magic and traditional martial arts are blocked here, and even against monsters, only newly acquired skills can be used. The B-rank seeker takes up a sword. Toru asks him to listen first and says they are partners from the same village, so he will train the girl rather than use her. The man says that if he truly helps him, the two of them can go out, fight him, and prove their worth. Toru sighs. Refusing to dull his sword, he asks to use the training one, and the other man tells him to do what he wants. Toru goes to the swords, picks the top one, and says that won't do. Growing angry, he demands to know how many more he has to face and tells them to let him figure it out quickly. Toru says there isn't a single decent one here. He asks to see the sword his opponent took. Growing angry, he thinks Toru is a completely incompetent worm and wonders why Toru is acting that way here. Toru grips his sword, inspects it, and says it's still fine, then grinds his teeth in anger. Finally, they face each other, and the judges tell him to come closer. Enemy forces immediately take a secure attack position and prepare to fight. One says he immediately raised his fighting spirit to full at the very start of the battle. The second says Sir Russell's Battle Guardian feature was granted by the god of fire Rathlight. Russell thinks Toru will fall from a single blow. Toru tells Sarah to watch closely what's happening, and she immediately smiles and says she is watching him. Russell wonders if Toru will fight him one-on-one at B rank. He yells that Toru is a low ranker and swings his sword, but nothing happens. At that moment he realizes he cannot use his martial arts. Toru seizes the chance and attacks him. He drops his guard and a sword strikes his stomach. Russell drops to his knees, gasping for breath. The guard screams in shock. Toru presses a sword to the guard's neck and says they will leave then. Russell stands, tells Sarah to come with him, and feels his fighting spirit return. He immediately calls down a fire strike at them, and Toru suddenly shouts Sora's name. The barrier triggers and the fire snaps back into Russell, who groans and falls onto his back as he burns in his own flames. The guards rush to him in a panic and ask the others to bring water, and on the way Sarah looks back once. Later, while they ate shashlik at the table, Sarah asked him what he had done. He looked up. Sarah said Russell looked surprised when he picked up the sword and wondered whether he couldn't ignite it. She added that Toru disliked him and that she had never seen him make a fool of anyone. Toru reveals that when he handed over the wooden sword, he actually restored his skill tree with it, and Sarah, surprised, says it's amazing and that she can hardly believe he could do that. Seeing Sarah's ability tree made Toru decide to redesign his own skill tree. If someone can see the past, they can undo a skill tree by restoring it. He tried shortening his recovery tree a little, and the spent skill points returned to the jug. Sarah says he can roll back the skill tree as much as he wants and grow other branches he likes, but Toru replies you usually cannot redistribute branches and adds that that's the catch. Their skill trees each have only one branch, and sadly that limits Sarah's size. Toru says he will rarely use it because once someone knows what it is, they can counter it easily. Sarah asks if he deliberately made him angry so he would not notice. Toru explains it worked because it was a sword fight. The first time he passed the sword, it rolled back his martial arts branch, and at the end when it touched his shoulder, it restored everything. They walk home, and on the way Sarah asks him what he will do if they come again. He says the accusation was far-fetched. Someone was jealous of their loot, but if they slow down, they won't be touched for now. He says the adventuring world revolves around ability, so when everyone knows someone is strong, fewer people will cross their path. Sarah worries that if everyone knows how strong he is, women will come after him, so she asks him to stop. Now Toru, thinking about his own affairs, says he thinks he has figured out who sent Rank B after them. It's very problematic, he says, but he'll have to talk to them soon. Sarah becomes worried and asks if it's a woman, and he says it's not. Toru walks alone down the street, while the rest of the townspeople are enjoying themselves, passing people eagerly playing musical instruments. He's in Choi's diner, a spacious tavern. Entering through a door, he is greeted warmly by a man, and inside are other important, elegantly dressed people, two men arguing enthusiastically, and a woman who turns her attention to him with a young man beside her. The first prince says they haven't seen each other for a long time and asks what wind brought him here, while the second, smiling, notes how many years and winters have passed since they last met. He sits down and says it's true they haven't seen each other in a long time, then asks one of them how she is doing and adds that she, as always, looks so wonderful he doesn't even know where to look. Straja, an A-rank member of Platinum Flame, is upset that someone always ignores him and keeps hitting on the second one like a true heartthrob. Koru says they are in the Platinum Flame and still spend time in that dive. Strasha says he doesn't need to stress it because it's impolite. They are close only because they studied under the same teacher. The girl's name is Nainsa, and she has a burned scar on her neck. Teru orders country-style potatoes and sausages, and the waiter immediately takes the order and brings the food. Tor tastes everything again, says it's all delicious as always, and the waiter smiles at him. The bearded old man keeps arguing with and shouting at the other man, insisting this is why, as he said, he won't last long using this method. Straja says the teacher seems to be in a bad mood. Dadan runs the adventurer's bureau in the border town and says one must manage money wisely and begin growing it with modest sums, otherwise one will end up like any fool from the neighboring village. Sako, deputy head of the border town adventurer's bureau, asks the teacher how he will use the funds, since 30% must be deducted just to maintain the army. Didin sips his mug and admits they have no money. Even fixing the outer wall won't last long. Sako admits the same. If the strategy works, it could lead to many costly orders. Toro asks the other two which strategy he means. Strachia replies he means it's time to shine a light on the fallen ruins. Toro asks Nainsa whether she can translate this into human language. According to her, the strategy's core is to capture the northern region of Basalia, which fell last year, and it's planned for tomorrow. Toru says that's why the bureau was so crowded this morning with A and B rank officers, and they must have been called up. Dadan clucks his tongue and says he can rely on a strategy with an unknown chance of success, and that iron will not become steel without tempering. Sako says he does want talented newcomers, but the talent and the person must match, and he keeps his focus on Tora. Diggin says this is why he became angry with Tora, and that he does not shy away from any methods. Then Dedon turns to Thor and asks whether he will remain silent and refuse to answer, since that is what he came for. Sako tells Toru he has a girl with a rare talent and asks if it's time to let her go, and Toru says that's what he wanted to talk about and asks Sako not to bother them. Sako insists this is not open for discussion and believes talented people should work with other talented people because they won't develop their skills when paired with untalented people. Nainsa says it sounds like someone is talking nonsense. Sako's eyes open wide at the sight of Nainsa. Surprised, he asks what happened to the scar on her neck, and she is just as puzzled. Suddenly, the girl starts checking herself, and Strasha eyes Tora suspiciously. Removing the bandage from one eye, he says that, cursed by magic, he will demonstrate a fraction of the power bestowed on that eye. Toru looks directly into Strasha's eyes. He immediately asks forgiveness and admits it was his doing. Strasha laughs, saying he gave in too quickly and offered no resistance. Nainsa tells Strasha to slow down. Nainsa asks him what he meant. He replies that he just restored it to that level and will put everything back if she prefers it as it was. She smiles and says there is no need, and she does not know how to thank him. Sako says he understands he can heal an old wound and asks what else he can do. Toru replies he can do all sorts of things. Sakotl's Dadan says it may be time for him to retire since he's quite old and could overwork himself, and Dadan snaps that he has no idea what they're saying and that with purple eyes he will never become a boss. Toru orders a serving of turnips with tenderloin and a drink, and the waiter complies. Data explains why he is so casual, and they are actually discussing something important. In an instant, the plate fills with food again, and everyone looks at it in shock. Sako says he understands it depends on how you use the skill and apologizes for being disdainful. Then Dadan notices something in the shouting. What is going on here? What does he have to do with it? Nanasa says something is happening to his head, panics and asks what is wrong with it, presses his palms to his bald scalp, and suddenly notices many thick hairs have appeared. Toru says that despite what he said, he made him look younger, and he asks what he just said and how that happened, while Didin says he apparently did spend a long time developing this useless skill. Sako says he knows how to make them keep quiet and suggests they lock him in the bureau's interrogation room for now. He warns that if someone reveals this skill, priests will flock to them and pester them, and before long others who want hair will join in. Didin says if this happens he'll have to hide and maybe even lock himself in his house, all because of his favorite student. Stresha says this looks like retirement and asks why they do not have a farewell party. When handed his food, Thor gives two conditions. The first is that they leave them alone. The second is that they remove anyone who tries to interfere with them. That's all he asks for. Sako then asks what they will get in return. Toku first asks Sako to give him time to think. He says if they give him 6 months, he will prove he can reach the same position as both of them. Strisha smiles, anticipating something. Sako asks if that is too ambitious for someone of low rank, and Strisha says that if Sako gives him his partner, he could speed up their progress. Toru says he can't do that, even with his connections and his ability to push people, and he can't cultivate talent because he's too gifted and everything comes easy to him, so he expects too much from others. He realizes that in the past 10 years, none of his people have been promoted, except for 2 of the Platinum Flame, Ninsa and Strasha. Laughing, he said he would finally have a say. Sako says, on the other hand, their director loves being a retired adventurer, so he started a trend of adventurers retiring early. Dedan is indignant at his words. Toru tells them he's not trying to upset them, he just wants to carry on with what he's always done. Dawn tells him he is, as always, not particularly mercantile, and he offers his resignation, saying he can live with it, but the other replies he does not want to resign and will consider it if asked with all his heart. The townspeople say he probably still wants to be a field adventurer and ask how long he plans to keep it up, while Toru says he wants to keep improving and believes he will one day reach their level. Chiru thinks the ceiling of the great gates over the underground labyrinth's miasma will collapse onto these 2, and the best positions are held by the 2 people who saved the world. Considering the honorary title Great Hero, he is thinking it over. Strasha hugs Tora and says he likes these far-reaching plans, stressing that some do not include him and that he will be looking forward to Tora. Watching the scene, Sako thought Didn had seen it and said he should stay an adventurer as long as he could and leave the rest to him. Sako muses that, judging by how Russell was knocked out, something fishy is going on. It's bad politics for the director to stay on his side, so he accepts the terms and will tell his subordinates to keep their hands to themselves. Even so, he should be reasonably aware of his progress. Toru calmly says he's glad he accepted his conditions. Leaving the coin, he rises and says the discussion is over and asks to be excused. Didn rises and asks what he is doing. It is still a child's time. He suggests they sit and reminisce about the past. Toru leaves, the waiter smiles and asks him to come again, and Adon remains indignant that no one listened to him. Sako asks Dedan if he really plans to let him go like that. Dedan says yes, calling Sako stubborn and saying he never listens to anyone. Dedan asks whether that is true because Sako will not admit defeat. Sako says that is not what he means. Curious, he asks Dadon if they'll even let him into the house with hair like that. Toru and Sarah arrive at the worker with a cart, and she looks, amazed by their catch of 2 giant caterpillars. Toru tells her to sell one whole, split the other in half, sell one half, and cut up the remaining half. They leave with money and meat. Sarah says she is hungry and suggests they go home early to fry the meat. Toru tells her not to rush because he wants to take her somewhere today and says they have plenty of meat they'll definitely like. They reach a dark corner. Toru puts the meat on the floor for Sarah to watch. 2 cats dash out. Sarah looks surprised. Toru asks them to forgive him for being late. Sarah asks if he meant these cats, and he says yes, that he often feeds them here but has not been here for a long time. Petting a cat, Sarah says she helped with hunting too. Toru tells her to leave him alone while he's eating. The cat crawls toward her, showing affection. Sarah smiles and tells Thor to look at the cat's contented face, and he looks surprised. A second cat cuddles up to Sarah, and she asks if the cats are enjoying it. Toru believes he fed them for 6 months to help them get used to him. Sarah stands and notices a strange sensation. He tells Thor there's something interesting and that someone seems to be watching them, hears nothing, then Sarah calls out to show him her catch. Turning his head, he sees Sarah holding a little girl. Toru is shocked. When Sarah says they're playing hide and seek, he doubts she's really a local child and is surprised this might be the 3rd one. The girl says she should not eat moo because it is not tasty. Sarah says she will not eat it and asks what it is called while her stomach rumbles, and the child says he heard it was tasty. Seeing the cats eating, he rushes in toward them. Mew catches Toru and lifts him up, then asks whether he has been eating with the cats all this time. Toru twitches and says it is his food. Toru asks about his parents, but Mew is silent. Toru says there is not enough for all the homeless and that he is sorry. With a pitiful look, Sarah tugs his arm. He sighs and says he'll have to ask the owner's permission. Sarah asks Mood to come with her, and Mood asks what they will do with him. Sarah asks if he would like to eat something good, then gives her name, introduces Toru, and tells Mood he can call her big sister. Mew learns their names, but gets Toru's name wrong. Most says he wants to eat, and asks the child not to call him that. At last, Toru, Sarah, Mew, and 2 other cats return home. The owner says they have nice guests today. Thuru says they seem to have become attached to him. Asking permission, he offers to stay a while and care for them here. The owner agrees and offers to heat the bath for them. He says they would be very grateful. Mew asks where the food is, and Toru replies that he has to be washed first. Mew asks if they really decided to eat him. Mew turns out to be a girl. Sarah asks whether Restore can clean the dirt, and Toru says he scanned her skill tree but got 0, indicating she hasn't earned any points from monsters yet. Sarah says she'll try to be good. They start washing her, with laughs and shouts about how ticklish she is. Sarah asks her not to twitch. Toru says it's strange that she doesn't have lice or anything. Sarah says the cats didn't have fleas either. Toru notices scars on Mew's body and wonders what caused them. Sarah tells Mew that Mew has such cute purple eyes. Toru says this is a trait of the Purple Eye tribe. Toru holds a lamp up to Mew and tells Sarah to look. Toru says they're very good at finding their way in the dark. Sarah happily says it's wonderful. Eurohands moves the old things and tells her she can have them if she wants, calling her Mumu, and Sarah corrects her. Toru notes the Violet Eye tribe often uses repetition in their names, so that is also correct. He says boys have double letters in their names and girls use repeated syllables, so her real name must be something like Lala Mumu or Mumu Lele. He says they have this tradition because they consider the thunder god, Jijiro, their patron, and try to create similar names to receive his blessing. After changing her clothes, Mew asks Toru how she looks. Toru says she dressed properly and it suits her. Today Sarah says she is very hungry after her honest work. They wish each other a pleasant appetite, and Mew impatiently asks if it is time to eat. They start eating. Mew bites into the meat and says it's delicious. Toru tells her to chew it well and that no one will take her food. Sarah agrees with Mew and says it's simply delicious, and in her opinion the ham is the best. She wanted to suggest bringing something on the hunt tomorrow, but Toru tells her to chew well, take her time, and drink water with her food. Sarah obeys and drinks it. Ural wishes Thor had met the children sooner. Noticing something, she asks Sarah if anything is wrong. Sarah apologizes, saying she just noticed that her ears are longer than usual. Ural explains she is from the Ash Ear tribe. Sarah says she thought so, and that she is from far away. Toru says the mistress comes from the north, and that he heard their ears grew longer, so they could hear better on the snowy plains. Ural says that's not true, and that the ears grew to catch the teachings of the ice god's dragon. Toru apologizes. Ural says this is what they're told, since they are often teased as gray rabbits. Ural asks if Sarah knows much about other countries. Sarah apologizes and explains she grew up in a remote village. Ural offers to teach her a little at a time if she wants. Agreeing readily, Sarah says she would be very grateful. Ural starts by saying that hundreds of years ago, a huge hole opened in the ground and overnight the country fell into it, and from that abyss all kinds of monsters emerged, plunging the world into total chaos. Long ago, a large country at the center of this continent was technologically advanced, and its people lived peaceful, prosperous lives, and refugees later scattered in all directions to settle in remote regions. Over time, people blessed by the 6 great deities began to appear, forming a community in the central region where people like Thor and Sarah live, and that region is protected by all 6 divine powers. Sarah says she was surprised to see people with horns or scales, but now she understands where they come from. Toru says it's mainly because they rarely visit their village. Iral asks Toru about his plans for the future. Toru says he originally planned to feed Mew and send her away, but now he thinks he'll look after her a little longer. He remembers his teacher had purple eyes too. The night passed quietly. Toru visits the armorer Ram, who greets him warmly, says he has not been in for a long time, and asks whether he is really looking for something. Toru says he came to place an order and asks if they are busy now, and Mew and Sarah are with him. Rummy says people usually neglect their gear and later bring it in tattered for repair. Punching Thor lightly in the chest, he says he takes excellent care of his things and that everything is in perfect condition. He wants to check whether he actually came to the place in order. Toru says he urgently needs a new pair of shoes. Rumu asks if this is an order for the child. Toru calls and asks them to at least say hello, noting the shop owner may look a bit scary but knows his business. Sarah greets him and says she is his future wife. Rama wonders when he managed to get married and even have a child. Toru says he is just looking after a friend's daughter and picked her up yesterday. Ramu thinks Mew is a boy and calls Mew over to measure his foot, and Sarah says Mew is a girl. They take measurements. Ramu says he'll leave a little room for growth. Will the boots fit them? Mew asks Toru what it's for, and he says it's to keep her feet from getting dirty. Toru asks if it can make the soles of her feet as soft as a cat's paw pads. Ramu says this is his request and that he will try using a soft material. Toru reminds him he had been grumbling about a cancelled coat made of hip eponymous skin. Ramu says he is talking about the coat he did not sell. Ramu snaps at him, asking if he intends to drag the child along on his forays, but he gives no answer. Ramu makes a hand gesture to indicate he wants to talk outside. Mew copies it and asks whether it is a greeting. Sarah says the gesture means he wants to talk outside. The two come out and Ramu starts shouting that those equipment orders made no sense, and the child, who looks unlikely to last long in combat, knows Ramu does not tolerate bad work. Toru admits she's small but insists she has talent, and Ramu begins to object, saying he knows she wouldn't lie just for the sake of it, then falls silent. Toru interrupts him and says he will show a trick but asks him not to tell anyone. He takes the leather armor, and Ramu worries it needs serious repairs and tells him not to touch it. Using his skill, Toru hands Ramu a new, clean armor. He can hardly believe his eyes and says there isn't a single scratch. Ramu spreads his arms enthusiastically, and Mew asks if this is also a sign of greeting. Sarah replies that it means he has given in to the argument. Rumu tells him he doesn't understand anything, that it was clearly not a trick, but the armor was in terrible shape. He asks what he did. Toru says this is his skill. He trained for it and can now do something like this. Rummel asks whether this is true, then rejoices and shouts that it had finally happened and that he had finally managed it, and quickly pats Toru on the back. Suddenly he calms down, admitting he's probably overjoyed and that this could cost him about half his earnings, and Toru assures him he won't compete and will keep adventuring with him. Noting the skill also works on humans, he says Mew won't die that easily so he doesn't have to worry, and he finally asks what he thinks and whether he will take the job. Ramu says calmly and confidently that he will try to do something special for her. Toru picks up the other armor, waves his hand, and fully restores it. Rumu takes the armor in surprise and says the damage to the hippopotamus skin armor has vanished. He tells them to wait and asks what happened to the patch. Knowing the seams can be repaired, he wonders how the torn-out pieces were handled. Toru says his restoration skill can restore some lost material, asks in surprise whether that is really true, and then talks about what it would be like to get dragon skin armor. He insists it's not that rare, yet ignores the value of a white ferret's skin. Toru reveals his recovery skill has a limit after testing it on a horned mole by cutting off its horn. It restores only 30% of what is missing. Even a small piece can be hard to recreate. He believes the brain does not represent the object's finished form and treats its current state as complete. Ramu then asks whether larger armor will give him a greater benefit. They shake hands like brothers, and Mew and Sarah have been watching them through the window the whole time. 4 people stand in the adventurer's bureau. The long-haired man asks Rickal whether he heard the old man they met was actually something else. Rickal asks whether that is true. The third says he heard the same, and that there is a rumor the man even won Brang. The girl doesn't believe it and says it sounds like a fairy tale. The man says the girl with him used a secret ability no one knew about. Rickal asks whether she is that cutie. Their talk is cut short by Mew's scream asking what kind of place this is. Everyone turns around. They watch Toru come in with a child. The girl asks where the child came from. The flushed-faced man says Sarah and Toru are a boy and a girl. One says they don't look like relatives, and someone remembers she called him daddy. They don't understand and keep following, unsure what's happening. Maybe it's the stepdaughter. Toru leans toward Mew and asks him to lower his voice, saying this place is the adventurer's bureau. Mew repeats the name, saying the owner mentioned it, and asks if this is really Toru's job. Sarah leans in and says she will show Mew around as her teacher. Mew points to the bulletin board and asks what it is. Sarah explains it is a bulletin board where people post what they need or suggest doing things together. Mew asks right away if she can write something on it. Sarah agrees at once. Toru does not even have time to complain. Mew stands on his tiptoes but still can't reach, so Toru picks up the child and asks if the child is comfortable. Mew draws 5 people on the board with a smile. They ask her what it is and she points to the biggest one and says it is Toru, with Mew beside him holding his hand. Sarah points to the smaller ones and asks what they are, and Mew says they are Kuro, the black cat, and Shima, the tabby cat. Sarah points to a person and asks if it's her, but the woman says no, she's the owner. Toru asks if she's finished and says they'll go to the desk. Sarah, worried, asks why she's not there. Mo is registering as an adventurer. The worker asks if she can handle it, since the document says she is only 9 years old. Toru says the rules set the minimum age for an adventurer at 8. This girl is a magician, he says, and she won't need to get close to monsters. Unfortunately, the worker says she cannot allow this. Toru asks to hear the reason. The Purple Eye Tribe's lightning magic has no lower branch for the basic attack skill, so Mew's default starting skill is rare electric detection. Putting the person with that skill to work detecting monsters will prevent her from progressing, so she cannot give permission for it. Toru asks again if she will be unable to earn skill points, and the worker confirms this. Toru tells them not to worry because they'll figure it out once they scan her skill tree. The worker looks at him, annoyed. She sets a ball in front of the other woman and asks her to put her hand on the analyzer, and the other woman reaches out and places her hand on it. Mumaimai holds the ancestral tree of purple lightning, given by the deity of lightning. Her available skill is Electric Spine. Toru says Electric Spine is a passive magic skill that lets her counterattack attackers and gain points. Awkwardly, the worker says there shouldn't be any problems, so she hands her an adventurer's token now. Mu extends his hand to him. Toru squeezes her hand the same brotherly way he did with Rommel and gives her a token. Toru says everything is ready for the sortie, then stops abruptly and asks where Sarah is, and they see her still at the board saying she is still drawing while leaning on a chair. They move toward her, Toru pushes ahead, and Sarah says everything is ready and that this is better. Mew glances back at the board for a moment and moves on. Toru shouts to Sarah that they are leaving already, and Sarah grows indignant, wondering when this began. Now the board shows Sarah holding Moose's hand and smiling broadly. She runs towards Thor and Moose. Mew clenches her fists and shouts that everything is fine, and Toru watches as a huge surge of electricity forms around her. Surprised, Sarah asks what it was and says it is beautiful, and Toru explains it is a magic called Electric Spike that counterattacks an opponent when they attack the user. Mew says the itching is gone now. Sarah then tells her it seems she no longer has any fleas. Toru rests his palm on Mew's head and checks her skill tree. Electric Spike automatically counterattacks any enemy that attacks the user. Applying recovery to an Electric Spike branch returns the bud to 0 level. Mew possessed this skill from birth, and Toru notes with a smile that the tree has only 3 buds. Toru says it is excellent and asks her to try it in his eyes. Mew looks up while Sarah watches the movements closely. Sarah guesses why Mew would look into his eyes. A sudden strange feeling makes Sarah turn around and wonder where the same feeling from that alley is coming from. Mew looks down immediately, and Toru asks if something is wrong because she was so cheerful a moment ago. Mew responds with concern, asking whether Toru will be angry with her. Sarah is worried and confused about what is happening. Toru reassures her that everything will be fine, that he won't be mad, and that he's actually happy you want to do this. Mool asks again if this is true. Toru sits down, strokes her cheek, and tells her not to worry so she can look at him again. Smiling at him, she's at her own tree the next second and says it's a strange tree, and Toru says he's glad everything went well and asks her what she sees among the roots. Mew asks if he means that round object. Toru tells her it is her special ability, called Feeling Exchange. Feeling Exchange lets someone swap feelings and emotions with a target that is always active. This ability is very effective and works in the field of vision. Toru thinks she probably began living with cats because she was afraid to use the skill. Few people are born with a spiritual instrument, and those around her likely saw her as a child of evil. Back in the forest, Toru asks if she is doing well. She doesn't answer and immediately hugs him, while a sleepy Sarah sits in the background. Toru suggests trying again, asks if she can see the 3 buds on the trunk, and when she says she can, explains that to raise the middle bud she must pour the water in this vessel onto the roots. Obeying, the mule lifts a large vessel of water and pours it onto the tree's roots, and immediately a branch begins to grow. Mew screams that something strange has grown, a branch shaped like an arrow with a curved base. An electric radar shows the direction and distance to the nearby enemy. Toru asks if she will try to use it, and she replies happily that she will. In the background, Sarah watches everything with interest. Mew clenches his fists and closes his eyes, and when he opens them, many electric arrows shoot off in all directions, wrapping around trees and flying past people. Mew points and shouts that she felt something in that direction. Toru listens and offers to take a look. Sarah is confused and asks them to wait while she finds out what is happening and why she can now use 2 skills. Toru turns and presses a finger to his lips to tell him to be quiet. Sarah whispers to ask if Mew really has 3 skill buds. Mew runs over and says he has found it. A slug is crawling on the tree. Toru lifts Mew into his arms and hands him a knife. Taru tells her to aim at the spinning cannonball and destroy it. Mew hits and destroys it. Taru praises her, saying she did a good job. Mew asks if she did a good job, and Toru says it was great and decides it is more convenient than he thought, especially given his limited skill. Sarah walks over and pats Mew on the head, saying she's handled him, but her little sister isn't going to lose to her. Toru tells Mew she is doing great, but warns the next step will be very difficult. Mew replies confidently that it is not a problem and she will handle it. Toru says that's great and suggests she go back to the tree to take a look. Toru tells Mew to try growing the top bud this time, and Mew happily obeys, pouring a vessel of water onto the roots. The butt grows, and the lightning needle boosts the user's speed and agility. Toru asks her again if she wants to try. Mew is already preparing and summons a thunderstorm. Small lightning bolts come from her body and stay there. Sarah says it looks very painful and asks if it is really safe. Toru asks how she is and whether she feels any pain. Mew says she's fine, there is no pain, only a strange sensation. Toru holds small stones in her hands and tells her to try to dodge them then. He tosses them lightly one after another, and Mew dodges each one with little effort. She even missed the last stone by leaning her body back. Sarah says admiringly that it is incredible and that she dodged them all. Mew raises her hands and cheers that she awakened a new power. Toru says the job went great and he did even better than he expected. Mo hugs him. Toru asks if she can share the power with him now. She agrees immediately, but then wonders how she would do it. Toru says she probably never returned someone's feelings. Todd doesn't understand what reverse means. Tobru remembers Sarah saying those cats had no fleas, and he tells her it's true, pointing out that apart from Moose's Mage, the others were not in that condition, and Moose shouts that Kuro and Shiro are always with her. Smiling, Toru asks if she would mind sharing with him too, and she begins to think and act. Lightning also appeared on Toru's body. He asked her to close her eyes and cover her ears and nose, and to share only the lightning needle with him. Mew said it would not work all at once. At his command, she closes her eyes and ears. Toru feels it and says it's right on target. It worked. After a quick check, he appears behind Mew at high speed and lifts her up. Toru says that's great and they will start hunting. Sarah asks them to wait a minute and asks about her. Isn't she with them? Mew tells Sarah it is too early. Sarah says no and asks Mew to share with her, but Sarah is ignored and Mew tells Thor she is hungry. Toru hands her an apple and tells her to snack on it. Sarah stays behind, looking sad. That evening, they arrive at the Adventurers Guild office and set many goblin ears on the table. Surprised, the worker says that from what she can see, Toru brings in more each day. Using electric radar and lightning needle increases the number of enemies encountered and speeds up hunting. Handing over the money, she says it contains 1 silver coin, 1/2 silver coin, and 37 copper coins. They take the money and leave. The worker notes that lately most of the squads hunting goblins haven't been doing well, but for some reason Toru's squad has gotten better at exterminating them. She can't imagine how a 50-person squad could find 50 monsters in a day, much less kill them. They walk home with Mew sleeping on Toru's back. Toru says wandering through the forest and hunting all day must be very tiring for her. Smiling, Sarah says Mew was incredible and that she could use and switch between those skills even though she had just learned them. After using the inversion skill 3 times, she runs out of mana and struggles to breathe. Taurus says there's nothing they can do about it because they have different mana reserves, their inclinations matter, and it depends on the type of magic used. Like Mew probably increased her power by repeatedly using her electric spikes on herself, which got rid of her fleas. He says inversion can't be used unless a monster attacks her, but when that happens Sarah can do a lot. Sarah tells him she can manage too, and that Toru must be tired. He thanks her and says everything is fine and that Toru will tell her when he is tired. Sarah tells him he can count on her because she wants to get along better with Mew. Toru agrees, saying it's odd that she's the only person she dislikes, and suggests she may have used the emotion swap on girls her age in the past, leading to a bad incident between them. Toru says she shouldn't rush and should relax. Sarah agrees and thanks him for worrying about her. Toru says she has a favor to ask, and Sarah eagerly asks what it is. He asks if she slept with the cats last night, and Sarah says she did, explaining the pair came to her and she was too hot to sleep. Toru suggests trading the move for 2 cats, and Sarah says the cats at first followed them into Toru's room during the move, but started scratching at her door in the middle of the night. Sarah says she's not entirely sure, but she thinks that's how it happened. After that, she suggests that she, Moo, and the cats sleep together in her room. Since there's no space in her room, Sarah can sleep at Toru's, but Toru refuses, saying his bed is too small and it will be hard to sleep. Sarah calls him a liar because she knows Thor can sleep anywhere. They approach Ural's house. At the main gate in the border town of Dadan, many people gather to see the troops off. At Choi's place, Toru learned that all the top officers had been sent to Bozalia to bring her back. In the Goblin Forest, all 3 keep hunting. Mew's magic supports and protects every move Toru makes. They kill several caterpillars. At the end, Mew asks whether he has dealt with everyone, and he says he has handled them and they are finished. He says hunting large caterpillars is like fighting a mage, so the electric shield proved very useful. Sarah tells Mu they need to get rid of this fur and asks for help making a fire. Mu replies that she is busy right now. At last she moves forward and reaches for the fur before Sarah can warn her that the white fur will itch. Moe immediately trembles and screams that she is itchy all over while he reaches toward his hand with a pitiful look, says she is itchy all over, then uses recovery to rid her of the itch. Mu says she's feeling much better now, and Toru tells her to listen to Saru. Saru says Toru is like a real father now and asks whether it's time for him to find a nice wife. Total ignores her and tells Mu this is great, suggesting he deal with the white fur. They build a fire and warn Mu to be careful not to get burned. Toru shows that putting a branch into the fire makes the flames spread to it. She grabs the stick and looks surprised. They load the tracks into the cart. Sarah asks if that means the cart can't take 3 at once. Toru says it's a rental item and the magic stones rank is too low, but it's much easier to pull than to carry in your arms. Toru notices Toru's sad face and asks what is going on, whether the caterpillars have really caught her interest. He thinks she's wondering if caterpillar meat is tasty, and she confirms it. Toru suggests they get home first, and if she gets tired, he will carry her. Mu is happy about this. They reach the gate. Carlos is standing there and asks him where he found this little girl, since he wasn't on guard yesterday. Sarah greets him and thanks him again for his hard work, and Carlos says she is as sweet as ever and asks if she would like to have dinner with him. Sarah says it's a wonderful idea and that they would all love to go. Carlos says there is no need for excessive familiarity. Mu wakes up and asks if she's home yet. The first thing she sees is Carlos's eyes. Carlos asks what's going on and whether she's from around here. Carlos hits her on the forehead, and she gets angry, screaming that he is a stupid man and accusing him of mistreating Mu. Carlos tells her he is Mr. Carlos, and she cannot understand how he knows Muz's name and finds him very suspicious. Toru simply agrees with her. They walk on, Toru shouting at him that they'll see each other again, and Carlos shouts after him that they're not finished yet. The Bureau gave them 2 silver and 18 copper coins. A week has passed since the group with Sarah formed, and during that time, they saved 5 silver coins while he put the same amount into his bank account. Skill points tell a similar story. He and Sarah have about 150 points. Mu has about 70. If they keep this pace, the 2 of them can reach level 2 within 2 months. Walking past the stalls, they hear people shouting about all the food, and Toru tells her it is for sale and she cannot try any without money. When Mu hears they need money, she calls them savages, and a surprised Toru asks where she learned the word. Sarah arrives with a kebab and hands it to her. The woman bites into it eagerly, and Sarah gives a skewer to Thor, who asks where she bought them and is surprised she knows this place. Mu smiles and says it's very delicious. Sarah tells her there are many tasty things here. Silence falls as Toru watches them. Toru suddenly mentions a nearby bathhouse and suggests they go there together later. Sarah panics and says she is not ready at all. Toru doesn't understand her and says they're just going to wash up. Sarah replies that girls, he knows, have enough worries. After a moment's silence, Toru says that if she wants to, they should go back and suggests bringing the mistress along after the horses have had a snack. They arrive at a building, and Mu is surprised to learn it is a bathhouse. The girls leave separately, and Toru says they will see each other later. Mu resists. Sarah says the girl should go the other way. The girl screams she wants to go with Toru. After changing clothes, Ural tells them to wrap a towel around themselves. As Sarah handed the towel to Mu, she vanished. Mu stands by the pool, says it's not that bad, and asks if she really needs to get in there. He tests the water with 1 foot and immediately winces because it's too hot. Angrily activating her ability, she jumps into the water and shouts that she will not lose. Sarah grabs her from behind and says they need to wash first. They sit on stools and start washing. Helping each other, Sarah and Mu rub backs and pour water over one another. Sarah says they're in the foam again. Mu says bathing is so much fun. They laugh and Sarah agrees. Ural helps them. At the end of sitting in the pool, Sarah realizes it has been a week since she returned to this world, yet it still feels like a big empty hole. The daily trips to the forest tire her and break her routine, but there is nothing more she can ask of the only person left who matters most to her. While watching Moose swim, Sarah asks if she loves her little sister, and Moose says she doesn't know. Sarah says she understands and loves her very much. Mew says she does not hate her sister. Mew spots a fan and asks what it is. Sarah says it is a fan, and that for 5 copper coins, you can insert a magic stone to make it blow for 5 minutes. While they play near the fan, Euro hands them apple juice and drinks it with them. Leaving the bathhouse, Euro apologizes to Thor for keeping him waiting, and Thor replies that he also just left and asks whether Mu behaved well. Mew admits the opponent was strong but won't lose next time. Sarah says she feels reborn and will try her best tomorrow. Toru tells her it's not true because they have a day off tomorrow. Maybe he forgot to tell her. Later in Uriel's house, a man approaches Thor, bows, begs forgiveness, and asks if he can help him. It is his teacher Dadon. Toru asks whether he truly wants him to restore the stone wall in the end. Dedon says that when he asks the temple of the earth god Jaiteros to do it, they ask him for 10 gold coins. Dadon asks the man to do him a favor and offers to give him all the devices from the magic stones he used. Toru asks why the request came so suddenly. Dedan says 9 years have passed since the monsters attacked the city, and people are slowly forgetting and no longer feel threatened. Chiro remembers what happened 9 years ago and agrees with him, warning that fixing everything at once would be risky, so it is better to start with first aid, and the Dane is pleased and says he is counting on him. The main forces have now set out on an expedition to Bassalia, and several reports have come in. Toru asks if the number of goblins has increased. Dan is surprised and asks if he knows about it. Even with the electric radar working well, the number of goblins in recent days has been strange. Dadon says he knows it's wrong to only help after trouble starts, but to protect the city's residents, he is willing to disgrace himself. Toru says he was the one who mentioned it, so he should not worry and asks if Dadin minds him going now, and Dadin replies that he does not mind and that he can go. Dawn says he stayed with Sako that day, and his conscience gave him nightmares about his hair growing out. Don't spend the whole day there before coming back, since everything is fine now, and he will leave the restoration to Tora. Sarah went shopping with the owner, so Toru had to rebuild the wall with Mew. They reach the wall, and Toru says things are worse than he thought. He tells Mew he will go now to find out more, and asks her not to go far. Mew obeys him, sits on the flying board, and says she will now be like the wind. Believing that without a teacher, even a child of special silver cannot reach the proper form, Toru stares at the wall, unsure where to begin. The outer wall is shaped like a horse's hoof, faces east, and surrounds the city. One entrance is in the lower city, and after you pass the gate, the goblin forest is on the right. On the opposite side is the main gate, facing the road that runs in front of the city. The site has 2 areas, inner and outer, separated by a moat with bridges, and if the outer walls are attacked, the bridges are destroyed. Toru arrives with a wooden ladder and says that's great and he'll start with the worst affected parts. This damage only affects cities that have been attacked by monsters several times. You cannot hide while using the recovery, and it does not cover a large area at once. Reaching toward the huge crack, he says he will start by restoring the hole to how it was 10 years ago, and he succeeds. The difference is obvious, and he doesn't expect anyone to go that far, but it would be bad if someone found out, so he should probably limit the area to the damaged part. Smiling, he knows he cannot completely restore the large missing fragments, but the piece of wall looks solid now, and the cracks have closed, so that is already good. Toru says that at this rate, he'll have to use the skill many times, and wants to be able to choose from several targets now. Selecting multiple targets is allowed only in special situations. The power is reduced because it is split among the targets, but with practice, you can attack several monsters at once. Toru says there's no point in wishing for something he can't have, but maybe it's worth trying it now. Using restorations, he handled many situations, like yesterday's hunt for large caterpillars, and the itch went away quickly. Chirou realized that by searching his mind with keywords he could find a lot, and spoke aloud about something flawless. He found a wall in a conscious state and restored it, correcting about 50 steps. Mew runs up to him with the cats and asks if he is finished with his work. Toru says he needs to wait for the recovery, uses count to update before she can go play some more. She keeps playing happily. Toru draws his sword and says that since he has to wait, he might as well try out this iron sword. Making sharp swings, he feels the Vij and concludes it is not comparable to a wooden sword. If he couldn't handle it, he wouldn't be able to go any further, so he took more swings and completed his training. After a while, he says that by some miracle, he managed to restore the northern wall in one day. The southern wall is next, but he needs to rest first. He goes to Mew and tells him they're coming back. When they get home, the hostess and Sarah have prepared dinner. They sit at the table with cats eating under it, then chat cheerfully among themselves and start eating. After a while, they reach a forest and Toru tells them they will hunt an armored boar today. Sarah says that's wonderful and that it sounds like a great party, while Mu confidently tells Toru she can leave everything to her. Toru says the armored boar is a huge beast that reaches a man's shoulder. It is not an easy opponent. Its skill is a level 1 smokescreen, and its magic and martial arts do little damage. Most of the time you need a level 2 or 3 skill to defeat him, but you can defeat him by watching him carefully first, and defeating him makes you a C rank F. Miu says she understands him, and that's why Toru's record turned blue. She says she wants a blue one too. Toru laughs and agrees that everyone does. Miu starts work right away. For the next 2 hours, she scanned for the armored boar with electric radar. Miu suddenly asks if this is a boar's den. Toru immediately covers her mouth with his hand. Sarah says it is not and that it is probably a goblin's den. They realize they are starting to emerge from there. Toru sees a hobgoblin among the regular goblins, and when Sarah doesn't understand, he explains they are a subspecies of goblins rarely seen on the surface and says that if things continue like this there will probably be a procession. Goblins keep coming out and their numbers grow over time, so this must be the dungeon. Miu asks what a dungeon is, and Toru explains that it's a deep hole in the ground where powerful monsters live. It resembles the Great Abyss, serving as an outpost for expanding possessions, and deep within it lies the so-called black hole. Every dungeon contains this black hole, and one theory says it is connected to the Great Abyss. Guarded by its lord, the labyrinth sends thick clouds of miasma from the black hole, and if nothing changes the number of monsters will only increase. Miu asks Toru if this is called an invasion. Toru agrees and adds the invasion could also happen if the surface monsters are not destroyed, because that would reduce the area available for life. At worst, all the dungeon monsters could emerge and seize territory from the surface dwellers, resulting in a double invasion. Miu asks if he will fight them, and Toru says no, it's impossible because the two of them can't take on such a horde of goblins. He says all they can do now is notify the nearest sawmill. There are 3 sawmills in the forest, and they have time to warn them all. Toru agrees and urges them to return quickly. Sarah also urges them to hurry. Miu doesn't mind either. Toru burns an unknown triangle, and when Miu asks what it is, he says it is a reward for restoring the wall, an incendiary mixture, and an igniting cylinder, adding that monsters hate the smell of the incendiary mixture. He says it should work well on the hobgoblins too. He throws a rock right into their lair. Goblins panic and look around as Toru shouts for the girls to run in one direction now. At the same time, the group of 4 is hunting. Hisoku tells Rikaru again that they are not ready for this, and Rikaru says attacking would be much faster. Hisoku admits they managed to pull it off last time, but the next encounter may not go as well. Ricardo tells him he is being too afraid, since nothing can be learned without trying. The girl starts swearing and asks how much longer they will keep this up, since she doesn't like that it's always like this. The girl turns to the third man, Sassen, and says he's their leader, so let him speak. Sisson says there's nothing to be done, so let her leave them because that's how guys are. At first, the squad wasn't like that, but Sisson understands their discontent and irritation despite all the harsh words. A few days ago, a new girl arrived and achieved outstanding results on her very first day, and since then the squad's atmosphere has changed, and they are talking about Sarah. Rikaru and Hisoku are childhood friends who left their village together. They met the magician Alacia in a border town, and their squad has been together for 6 months. A wealthy, high-ranking life could be theirs if they grit their teeth and work hard, but they had no outstanding talents to begin with. The ground suddenly shakes, and an armored boar appears before them. Panic spreads as the monster takes aim and growls at them. One of them asks if it is an armored boar and says it is much bigger than usual and has more legs. Ricardo steps forward as she shouts for him to stop, warning he cannot defeat the opponent, and he yells that he will deal with him. The monster lunges toward him. He jumps and swings his sword, but the monster still manages to scratch him. The monster's snout knocks Ricardo into a tree, leaving him bleeding from the mouth, while the other 3 scream his name in panic. Ricardo turns to them in a convulsive voice and, pleading and trembling, tells them to run. The monster stomps quickly toward the others. Sisson draws his shield and tells the others to run. If Soku starts to tremble, he freezes in place. Sisson runs off, leading the animal. Alicia moves in to record. Sesson believes he can buy them some time if he can withstand a few of his attacks. Alicia casts a spell to heal Ricaro and asks him to speak, but he stares blankly and does not respond. A sea of screams shows the first-level healing water will not heal him. Then she hears another sound and turns around. He watches the monster's fang pass through his shield and pierce Sesson's chest. The monster jerks its head, trying to pull it free. Season clings to his fang and barely speaks while asking for help, and eventually falls back, slips off the fang, hits a tree, and lands face down. The police officer starts sobbing and shaking, unable to believe her eyes. The monster stares straight at her. Rikaru suddenly stands and tells her to run, and she hugs him, shouting that she will not leave him. The monster charges at them, and an arrow suddenly strikes its forehead. Hisoku fired the arrow with trembling hands. The monster turns sharply toward him, and Alicia screams for him to run. He fires an arrow as Alicia covers Rikara, but his legs refuse to move, and as always he is frozen. The monster kills Hisoka, breaking his bow and arrows, and she cries his name in tears. Hisoku lies on the ground with broken limbs. Turning to her comrades, she remembers they were arguing just minutes ago. She doesn't understand why this is happening, having used all her magic and knowing this will be the last time. She heals Rikaru and speaks words that give a drop of water to her children, who strive for the Lord of the Tree of Life. The monster turns toward them. Alicia stands up, relieved she was able to save Rikaru, and walks toward the monster in fear. Ricardo spots a silhouette ahead and thinks it is the god of death. Alicia tightens her grip on her weapon and feels a hand on her shoulder. Toru tells her she did a great job and that everything will be okay now, and she begins to cry. Ricardo stands up and asks what happened to him. Alicia looks around. Toru shouts to Sarah that he is leaving them in her care, and Mew offers to lend him some power. Sarah follows his orders, and Mew triggers the thunderstorm. Toru moves quickly to reach Hisoka. Alicia sees he is alive and looks at them with hope as Toru gets past the monster, reaches Season, touches him and revives him, and Season recognizes Toru. Toru lunges and attacks the armored boar with his sword. His blade slips and fails to damage the monster. Toru worries that if this continues, the Fender needle will subside, and struggles to decide what to do. Looking back, he sees a tree, sprints to it and climbs the trunk, then weakens as the thunder needle's effect wears off. After falling out of the hollow, he runs as fast as he can, and when he touches a tree, the boar suddenly finds itself pinned between the trees. No one knew what it was. Alicia asks what just happened and how the old tree could do that. Mew shouts to Thor that he is incredible and was faster than the thunderstorm. Toru is surprised by his own strength and looks at his trembling palm. Rikaru asks Alasia what just happened. Alasia collapses, exhausted, and begins to cry, saying she has no idea. Rikaru doesn't know what to do, while Mew soothes her and strokes her head. Toru stabs the armored boar, making it groan in pain. Toru is sure it's an armored boar, but it's enormous, and those legs are strange. Shan approaches him, apologizes, and thanks him for saving them. Toru tells him not to worry because he was the one hunting him. Season awkwardly asks why he saved them. Toru presses a finger to his lips, signaling not to ask and to remain silent. Again, Susanna apologizes, and Toru says that no matter how you look at it, it has too many legs. Susanna agrees, saying it is not an ordinary armored boar but a special species, and he has met one before. If monsters are not hunted, their numbers grow, shrinking habitats trigger mutations, and the modified individuals, sharpened for battle, are called special species. Toru tells Shisen they found a goblin cave earlier, and the goblins suddenly started coming out, leaving Shisen surprised. Toru asks if he can help, while Rikaru says it does not seem like a big problem. Hisoku agrees and says the same. Alicia asks Sisen what he thinks. Sisen replies confidently that he'll go with Toru. They nod silently in agreement. Toru says they should leave now because this is the armored boar's territory. Sarah asks whether they really plan to leave their prey here, and Nu asks whether Toru does not want to eat meat. Toru says they'll pick him up on the way back, so they should go with him. Mew says he can't wait to get back. Lumber mills stand to the northeast and southeast, and another sits on the forest path. They open onto the forest path, and Toru says it is excellent. Despite telling them to head to the southern sawmill, the three of them end up at the northern sawmill. A man meets them and is happy to see Toru, but as soon as he tells them that goblins are crawling out of a nearby cave and the situation is very dangerous, panic covers his face and he screams that this cannot be. The man signals with a sound and shouts that they are leaving the cave and must evacuate, announcing an invasion is coming and that the city must be warned, so they prepare a smoke signal. Haru tells them to run and says they will take care of the rest. A man shouts as they go that they are relying on them. From a distance, they see the second signal, and Toru realizes Sinan's group also succeeded. The man shouts that he can already see the wall, so they have no time to rest and are already close. Toru thinks they told them, but the watchtower shows no blue smoke, and sending half the guards to Basalia clearly had an effect. Taru warns the girls that Arili is 100 times stronger and wants them to stay with her. Mo looks at Toru and says sadly that the tour needs to take care of something, so she should be a good girl and wait for him. Mew asks to go with him, and Toru says he will return when it's all over, leaving Sarah in Mew's care until then. Mew stays silent and looks sad. Toru touches her cheeks and calls her a good girl. After saying goodbye to Aru, who runs away, Sarah shouts after him to take care of himself, and Carlos meets them at the gate and asks Sarah where the old man is. She says Toru had something to take care of. Carlos is outraged that he has to deal with it at a time like this. Carlos says red smoke means danger, and Mew runs his cart into Carlo's leg. Carlos rides in pain and asks what she's doing. Mew yells at him to get lost, calling him suspicious. Mew tells him to leave his sister Sarah alone. Sarah awkwardly says everything is fine. According to Sarah, things are still very bad because many goblins are coming out of the cave. Carlos tells her this is impossible because the cave was secured 10 days ago. Preparing an invasion would still take another month. Scarlett tells himself it's even harder to believe the old man could be wrong about something like this, and says aloud that things are very bad and the boys from the South Sawmill still haven't returned. Carlos begins by saying he sees blue smoke and asks whether something happened to him during his return. Suddenly he jumps up and shouts at Sarah to go because they need to hurry. She calls out for him to wait and says she will help. Carlos asks what Sarah means and says she can't go there because she's only a young girl, hasn't even been an adventurer for 10 days, and it might be an invasion, so he can't take her. He warns that if he takes her along, the old man will give him a severe thrashing. Sarah stays where she is, thinking she can at least show people the way through the forest. Sarah tells Mew she has things to do and asks to go home alone. Mew shakes her head and says there is no point in even discussing that because she does not understand what she is talking about. Mew tells her that her sister Saru entrusted Toru to her, so it's Mew's responsibility, and they both go into the forest to help people. Sarah points to the outer gate as others run in panic, shouting that they must hurry or they will be caught. Sarah asks one of them what happened. The man sees her G-rank badge and tells her to get inside too because there's a huge boar in there and he thought they were done for. Another ad blamed them. They did not believe the four who came to warn them, so they were late to escape. Another account says one shield had a hole, and when they saw the smoke signal from the second point, they knew it was true and fled in panic. They had reached the outer walls when a huge boar attacked, and the four with them had to draw its attention to themselves, so they barely managed to escape. Sarah asks excitedly what happened next. He replies, disappointed and wishing he knew, and will tell the gate guards hoping it will help them somehow. Sarah tried to speak, but the man cut her off and said people can blame the adventurers if they want. It's the adventurer's job. Sarah says she gets very upset when she can't do anything. Mew says she feels nothing and is just following Toru's instructions. Smiling, Sarah says Mew is a very good girl, strokes her head, and notices a cowlick in her hair. When she touches him, Mew screams. Sarah apologizes and asks if she is in pain. Mew replies no, everything is fine, it's just a strange feeling for her. She starts scratching this little curl, laughs, asks if I like it, and says she really enjoys it. Mew tells her she can keep doing this. Sarah checks her head and finds a second one. Sarah asks Mew to tell her whether they really get along well. Mew answers that they do. Sarah squats down and asks if she can try that same union, asking him to look here because her appeal is clearly becoming more useful. She wants to find a better way to show her love. Mew asks whether Sarah will hate her when they become one, and Sarah assures him she will not. Mew asks whether she will stay calm even if it's unpleasant, and she says she will not get angry at all. People suddenly run out of the trees in panic, an armored boar close behind, and they grow wary. Just as the monster is about to attack someone, Sarah uses the appeal, and the monster smashes into a barrier, breaking its face. Sarah yells for the man to run as fast as he can, and he thanks her for saving him. As the monster slowly gets up, Sarah grabs the cart rope and tells Mew to hold on tight. They run away, and Mew shouts to everyone that the boar has stood up. Magic stones begin pouring out of the sleds. Sarah realizes there is no time to worry about the magic stone. They sprint with their last strength toward the gate, while the guards shout for them to hurry because the monster is closing in, and panic rises as it nearly catches them. They cross the threshold. Sarah sighs with relief and tells Mew they have succeeded, but Mew is not in the sleigh. Earlier, while Rikaru distracted the boar so the others could escape, Hisoku fired arrows directly at the monster from other bushes. Sinan hid behind another tree, readying his weapon and remembering Toru's words that the upgraded armored boar has more legs and greater speed, making sharp turns difficult. Sinan throws a rock at the boar, thinking that using this factor as a shield will let them dodge it. Sign admits it is still impossible for them to fight an armored boar face to face. They need only buy time so the sawmill workers can escape, then survive on their own. Carlos appears suddenly before him, apologizes for keeping them waiting, and says he will take care of him from now on. The other three come out of the bushes and cheer at Carlos's arrival. The monster charges him, but Carlos wounds him in one leg, then the other, and the final spear drives straight into his mouth. Carlos says now is not the time to open his huge pig snout. Carlos then declares this is the end and throws his spear at the monster. A sudden electrical flash surprises Carlos. his spear becomes electrified and strikes the monster's entire face, leaving nothing of it. Carlos smiles as the other kids gather around him, says the invasion was just a rumor, and tells him to leave or they'll be late for the festival. Sarah frantically searches for Moo and asks people if they've seen the child, and a man says he hasn't seen her since they went through the outer gate. Sarah panics, hits the gate, fear freezes her and makes her doubt whether she really wants to kill them all, and she says that Mew has disappeared. Rican nudges her and talks like he cares. He locks the gate, and Sarah asks him to wait. Recon warns her she can die if she wants, but not to drag them into it. Sarah says Mew is still outside. Reckon shouts at her, but she still tries to open the gate. People warn her not to be so reckless, since even a stupid person can see what will happen if she opens it. It's too late, because she most likely died a long time ago. Others step in, shouting that they remember his name and warning him to watch his language. Someone shouts that he tried to close the gates even though he knew they were still there. Rickon says he was trying to save the city. They tell him his job is to fight monsters. Outraged, they say Sarah protected them and shout at Rickon that he has been paid well so he should do his job properly, but he just lies around all day. The second one shouts he's a former adventurer and can handle that boar alone. Rika stammers that no, he's only a shield bearer and can't do it alone. Rickon bolts from the gate and the townspeople chase after them. At the same time, Sarah hears Moo summoning a thunderstorm. Abruptly, she stands and knocks on the huge gate, calling to Mew to see if she is there. Sarah only catches the words about protecting her little sister. Here, Sarah remembers the words Toru entrusted Sarah to her, and that when the gate was closed, Mew herself jumped off the sled to make it lighter, so no sound was heard. Sarah starts trembling and crying, saying she regrets everything because she didn't listen to Thor and didn't go to the city from the very beginning. Sarah shouts through the gates to Mew that she has a request and asks Mew to listen for a little while because just this once she wants to become one with Mew. They hear the sounds of battle. Sarah screams, begging her, knowing she will die if this continues. She realizes Mew is now using his electric spike and has not given up, fighting to survive. Sarah yells again that there are still so many fun things they haven't done. They haven't tried all the food stall menus yet, and she wants to go to the bathhouse with her and stroke her curls again. Suddenly, Mew asks Sarah if she means the things she ironed. Sarah confirms those are the ones and says she will iron her as much as she wants. When she asks again if she will hate her after they become one, Sarah shouts that it will never happen because she has no reason to hate her. Mew asks whether Sarah will get tired of her and be cruel to her, and Sarah screams that this will never happen. Mew says she used to cry constantly when her mother was cruel to her and still remembers her mother. Sarah says she would never say something like that or be cruel to her. She says Toru has always been there to save her, and now it's her turn. If Mew wants to go somewhere, she'll be there and take Toru with her. Tears in her eyes, Sarah tells Mew she loves her very much. After a while, a thin curl of smoke appears under the gate. Realizing what's happening, Sarah begins digging too, scooping dirt and tossing it aside while repeating her name over and over, and finally reaches out to feel the Mew's palm. Sarah reaches out, calls for Mew, and finally touches her. A strange sensation then washes over her. Now she sees something moving. A boar charges toward her at high speed. She immediately uses the appeal. The monster crashes into the barrier and blood pours from its mouth. The monster keeps attacking, and Sarah uses the appeal once more. Here, the boar's fangs are already starting to crack. On her third use of the appeal, the monster loses all its fangs, and the boar's muzzle detaches from the body and falls lifeless. The man gulps air and watches the monster die. After a moment, she wonders whether he is dead. She takes the stick, hits her face with it, and smiles. She stands up, shouting that she has won again and that she is incredibly strong. On the other side of the gate, exhausted Sarah realizes she was the one who defeated him and collapses unconscious. An hour and a half after the smoke signal was spotted, Harrison's flag went up on the clock tower and the guild members began to gather. Because many high-ranking adventurers left to retake Bassalia, a squad of about 30 ranged fighters and gatekeepers took up defensive positions on the wall. 40 more adventurers formed a close combat unit and emerged from the gate to launch a counterattack. Gatekeepers below E rank and many low-ranking adventurers stood in the city square in case the gates or walls were breached. A commander tells everyone that many enemies have been spotted at the northern gate. Looking down, they see numerous goblins riding armored boars, with caterpillars and other creatures crawling around separately. Boars smash into the wall while slugs and caterpillars press against it so the goblins can climb up. One person crouches and shouts he'll take care of these terrible goblins, while another yells at him to stop being reckless and keep his head down. A second later, the goblin throws a stone straight at his head, and the explosion kills him. Slugs latch onto people's legs, cause panic, pull victims down, and finish them off at the bottom. One shouts that they haven't been in a real fight for a long time and urges them to clean up here. The other shouts that the enemy outnumbers them, so they must not hold back and must stop them with everything they have. They follow him. To deal with the superior numbers of opponents, several mages combine their spells. The earth mages used a magnetic earth shield to turn the stones thrown by the goblins into shields. Seeing their chance, the archers began firing, and behind the defenders on the walls, the support squad played a song of valor to lift their fighting spirit and keep fear from shackling their hearts. Fire and lightning mages hurl spells to thin the goblin hordes. Suddenly slugs fly at them, one shouting that they are using caustic bullets. Someone groans in pain and says it looks like they grew tired of waiting and finally showed themselves. These are hobgoblin shamans. The archer fires tracking arrows so goblin mages can't hide, and the arrows kill by striking them in the head. The commander shouts that this is excellent and orders a melee unit to hold them, and the soldiers are now attacking the goblins from below. People kill the monsters one by one. Dan then steps forward in armor, and people say you cannot tell who the real monster is, which is to be expected from their boss. He calls down a roaring lightning bolt, making people panic that they might be struck, and then shoots lightning that kills all the monsters, including the boars, in a single hit. A huge hole opens in the ground. One soldier admits he really overdid it, and another shouts for everyone to fall back behind the walls before the rain starts. Rain starts. Dadden presses his hand to the wall and shouts that they somehow held them all back. The Thoris report said only the northern wall had been restored, and the monsters chose to attack it. While they concentrated their attack on a heavily fortified part of the wall, he admitted the hobgoblins were much smarter than he had realized, and their leader was nowhere to be seen. Dadden TSKS says it was just a diversion and lifts his head to the sky. Shortly before the battle for the northern wall, Taru hurries out, thinking he must rebuild as much of the southern wall as he can. On the way he hears rustling, looks out cautiously, and sees groups of hobgoblins moving through the forest. Toru cannot understand why their tracks are here, or why the goblins, who should have gone straight to the wall, hid in the nearby forest. Knowing the battle at the northern wall has started, he considers going back to call for help. Backing away from the idea, he knows that if that is the hobgoblins' true goal, it would be too late to reach the north wall. Remembering the events of 10 years ago, he says he will not let it happen again. More than anything, he doesn't want to lose that lucky dinner table. Then he sees the goblins start tearing down part of the wall. Tor realizes the attack was just a diversion. He clenches his fists. He needs to know if he can defeat the hobgoblins near the forest without disturbing the workers at the wall. Although he tried to immobilize the armored boar, it still moved at high speed for a while after the lightning needle's effect ended. He still remembers the feeling of every cell in his body pushing to the limit, and now he has to see if he can do it again. Drawing his sword, he decides he must try and bursts from the bushes, screaming as he charges, catching the goblins off guard. Toru swings his sword several times, decapitating several goblins. He immediately hides behind a tree because there are many of them. His hand trembles from the strain, but after steadying himself, he regains his composure and decides he can handle them at this pace. A dark, frightening aura suddenly washes over him, and he suspects it belongs to the person who ordered the diversionary attack on the northern wall. Toru realizes the hobgoblin leader, their strongest warrior, has appeared as the wall falls and the goblins break through. Toru knows that at this rate, the city will not be able to withstand an attack from two sides. As he approaches, the goblins notice and turn, and he first cuts off one goblin's head. Toru touches the wall and restores it once more, surprising and enraging the goblins. Surrounded by goblins, Thor realizes that about 10 of them have broken into the city. When they attack, he swings his swords and cuts off their heads and limbs one by one. Wounded by a goblin, he tries to heal himself with a shaky hand, but another goblin runs toward him. The goblin grabs Thor's sword and drives both blades into his stomach at once. Blood pours from Thor's mouth as he lifts his hand and stabs one goblin in the eye with his knife. Toru shoves the stunned goblin and kicks him in the chest, sending him backward. Screaming, Toru pulls the knife from his stomach and coughs up blood. The goblins watch him closely and recoil in horror when they see the wound has healed and no blood remains. He continues to fight and behead goblins. A speech asks the ice god to grant eternal rest to those who sinned against his will. Someone was casting the Ashen clan's ice sleep spell, which distracts targets and puts them to sleep for a short time. As the goblins fall asleep, Toru realizes only one person in the city can use this kind of ice magic. Ural walks up to him. All the goblins sleep sitting upright as the mistress smiles and congratulates Thor on his return. Toro asks the owner what she's doing here, and she sighs, saying places like this get attacked these days, which is why housing here is cheap. The goblins wake up suddenly, but Toru has already cut off their heads, leaving them no time to react. The horn from the north still hasn't sounded to announce their victory, and he thinks he needs to act before the hobgoblin chieftain and his troops can move on. He turns to his mistress, who nods and says she may not be able to fight for long, but asks permission to help him. Toru smiles and nods, walks to the wall and presses his palm to restore it, thinking he will have only 3 uses left after this. Goblins smash through the wall again and swarm in, then turn to see Uro casting another spell and telling them to find peace. While they hibernate, Toru kills them on the spot. The second group of goblins bursts in, their leader standing behind them and sending out fog. Ural contrast ice crystals. The goblins freeze in fear again while Thor swings his swords. They bleed and tremble but cannot do anything. Toru finds it amazing that merely inhaling these tiny crystals completely suppress the hobgoblin's regenerative abilities. Realizing his only option is to chop them up, he does, turns to the owner, sees she is ill, and catches her before she loses consciousness. Although her skills were basic, she repeatedly used them against several opponents. Interrupting their movements must have caused this exhaustion. She must have used an enormous amount of magical energy. The mistress leans against his back. A new crowd of goblins bursts in, and Toru picks out the moment when the mistress had her greatest store of magical energy. He will fully restore it. The goblins enter, see their comrades' corpses and try to run back, but they die instantly when their leader enters. Thor recognizes the hobgoblin leader and asks Urale if she can go. Urale asks if Thor is the reason even the pain in her hips has completely gone. Toru says he'll find a way and tells her not to push herself and to rest. Ural adds that it usually takes 5 F-rank heroes to defeat the hobgoblin chief. This looks like the test you have to pass to become an E-rank hero. Toru tells her not to worry and says he'll be fine, asking her to watch from a safe distance. Uriel says she understands and will leave him to Toru. Uro leaves the hobgoblin leader, begins to growl while Thuru trembles with excitement, looking at his body and thinking this skin is like armor and that he is wearing only fur. He wonders whether the steel blade can cut it. As the monster attacks, Toru decides he must aim for its head or the edges of its limbs. The monster swings his weapon at a rumologist, forcing him to dodge, then hits his face with his sword. The monster grows angrier and attacks again with its huge bone, and Toru dodges to the side. Smoke rises from the goblin's face, his wound heals completely, and he licks the remaining blood from his face. Toru realizes it is pointless, because even if he attacks body parts not protected by fur, he will still regenerate all the damage. He stands with shaking hands and a trembling sword. One place remains where his blade can still do damage. Toru lunges at the monster with his sword, aiming for its eyes, but he quickly raises his hands to protect himself with his forearms. Smoke pours from the monster's mouth, and Toru can barely hold on, but the goblin's hand slips and Toru hits it in the eyes. Screaming in pain, the monster covers his eyes with a hand, stumbles and loses his balance, and Toru attacks again, aiming to overwhelm him with a flurry of strikes. The monster reaches out and grabs Thor by the collar, and he realizes he is caught. Reaching out, he touches the wall and uses Restore. The wall expands and Toru falls onto his back. The wall pins the goblin, who can no longer see. Rocks fall on him. Toru breathes heavily, thinking he managed to restore the wall to how it was before the hobgoblins made the hole. Uriel approaches and tells him it was a good job and he must be tired. He turns his head to thank the mistress. The young Uriel silences him for a moment. Thor's mouth falls open in shock, his cheeks flushing at the sight of her. Uriel asks if something is wrong and why his face is so red. He mumbles awkwardly that it is not. Toru stands up and stabs the goblin leader in the head. He asks if the two have returned to the house, and she replies they have not. Toru thinks the owner still hasn't noticed the change for some reason. Toru can't use recovery in secret because he has no uses left. Uriel says she'll look after everything here and asks him to hurry back to the gate. Thor thanks her and says he will leave it to her, then hurries off as Uriel thinks about what to cook for her today. The rain has stopped and drops run down the plants. Carlos tells Thor he's late because the party is already over. A group with Season stands next to Carlos. Surprised, Thor said he thought the rally point was somewhere else and that the 4 of them had figured it out here. According to Sisson, just after the horses finished, they ran into another armored boar. Carlos saved them, and then they met Sarah and Mew at the gate and stayed to protect the area. Carlos says they united just before the gatekeepers arrived and then went on a rampage, tracking down the remaining troops in the forest. Toro tells Carlos he owes him something. Carlos blushes and awkwardly says he doesn't, and that Toro should find his own path, move on, and not worry about petty things like owing him anything. Thor hears someone call his name, turns and sees Mew and Sarah running toward him, and they both hug him tightly. Carlos and the others watch them with warm eyes. Tohiro immediately realizes that Sarah appears to have used the conversion and drained all her magic. Sarah says that after all this, she finally realizes it takes a lot of willpower to risk your life for someone else. She says she deeply regrets not realizing this sooner and wishes she had returned to the city immediately. Toru says he understands and that her realizing it matters more than anything. Mew asks if he wants to hear how she defeated the boar, and Sarah says she did. Toru stares at them, then suddenly hugs them tightly, and the girls blush and cheer. Torai says they did their best, and he can't put into words how relieved he is that they're safe, saying it's his fault for thinking of letting the adults handle it. Sarah objects, saying it wasn't his fault but hers because she couldn't do something so simple. Mew says she protected Sarah, just as he told her to. Growing indignant, Sarah tugs Mew's cheeks and says it's not right to defend her like that, and that if she does it again, she'll get really angry. Mew reminds Sarah she said she wouldn't get angry. Toru watches them interact and smiles, thinking they might finally be getting along. The next day, after defending Dan and City against a goblin attack from the goblin forest, the troops sent by Deputy Chief Sicko returned. The report confirmed the details of a long-running investigation. The area near Basalia, once destroyed, had become a vast dungeon. High-ranking adventurers suddenly entered the dungeon and handled any threats or problems. The real problem is that this infiltration happened just before the goblins' attack. At Choi's establishment, Peter Dadun asks Sako if he really means that yesterday's goblin attack was a consequence of the destruction of the Basalia dungeon. Sako says this is only his assumption, and he believes further investigation is needed to determine the cause. Sako says that after the attack was reported, countermeasures were weak, and the goblin sabotage distracted everyone, allowing them to infiltrate the city. Although the last of them was easily defeated by a passing seeker, the efforts were still a complete failure. Laughing, he says many thanks to the passing seeker, since if not for him the tragedy of Basalia would have been repeated. Sako gets angry and says this is not a joke. Dadun says he understands what Sako means. Sako asks Dadun to reorganize the nearby gate guards to reduce their number. Dad is already shouting that he will not just sit idly by and will reallocate his savings to rebuild the wall. Sako takes a drink and says calmly that it's his decision what to do, that he'll share his opinion with the committee at the next meeting, and that those who fought bravely yesterday should be rewarded. Dadun exhales and says the mood has dropped again, and despite their shrinking numbers the workload only grows, so if this continues their morale will hit rock bottom. Sako says it is inevitable given the current circumstances. Since there were no civilian casualties, it is far from the worst outcome, but the gate guards taking all their hands and closing the gate to the people makes them look bad. Dadun says they should definitely thank them for this. Soko adds that only 3 gate guards died this time, compared with 1 or 2 9 years ago. Dadun says it's hard to believe that his stupid student could become so capable. Sako says the person in question was with another seeker, but the establishment's waiter interrupts to talk about nameless heroes who famously defeated dozens of hobgoblins and their leader. The waiter turns and says there's even a rumor that one of these heroes is a beauty with a broom, and people in this city have caused a stir trying to find these mysterious heroes. Dadun says he's become a man, praising Toru for far exceeding his expectations. Sako agrees and they keep drinking. Detton remembers that Sako spoke of Lady Urel, and because Sako could not be deceived, he said it was unmistakably her. Smiling, Sako says he will be very surprised, as always, by her amazing beauty. Didden says that since Toru restored her youth, he might be able to get rid of Sako's constant rough look. Sako says his selfish desires can wait because there are more important things to deal with now. Dadun asks whether he means Basalia and what happened. Sako says they managed the dungeon itself, but the labyrinth boss is a tough challenge and defeating it will not be easy. Because of that, he wants Toru to try harder and become stronger. At that time, Toru meets Carlos. He asks if the man is leaving the gate guards and the city. The man confirms and says he's leaving with Rikan. Because he ran away and left the gates closed on innocent people, Rikan was stripped of his seeker status and will be banished from the city. After all, this loser has been his partner for years, and he can't just leave him like that. Carlos reflects on his actions and thinks they can somehow figure it out together. Carlos asks Tora to tell Sarah that he is sorry he could not take her to different restaurants, then calls Mew a squeaker and asks Mew to tell Sarah that he is actually a cool guy. Teru says it will be difficult because Carlos knows he will not lie to her. Carlos smiles at the answer. Toru offers his fist to him. Carlos offers a hand missing its wrist. Toru then tells him this is his parting gift. He remembers all their hunts together and how he restored the knives. Then he said this was all his skill could do. Carla begins crying and says the skill is not useless at all, not even a little bit, and he thinks it's an amazing skill. Carlos's arm is restored, and he looks at his hand as Toru turns and walks away from him. Ural is grilling meat while Mew and Sarah watch, delighted. Mew asks whether it's a meat party tonight, and Sarah tells Thor it's amazing and the meat is so thick. Ural says they also offer other boar dishes, like roast ribs with white beans, new round potatoes, and onions. Minced meat skewers with a soft, pungent filling are also available, and Ural says plenty remains, asking everyone to eat heartily. Yesterday Toru accidentally made the mistress young, but it would be awkward to age a woman who had regained her beauty and health, and when he casually asked her, he concluded she liked it very much. Mu wishes everyone bon appetit. Everyone begins eating. Sarah and Mu drift away, pleased by the taste. Everyone eats and the cats under the table enjoy the meat too. When they finish eating, Sarah says she has eaten too much and can't even take a step. Toru tells her it was because she got carried away and ate 5 whole plates, but she ignores him. Uriel says she hopes everyone enjoyed her cooking. Toru thanks her for the truly delicious dinner. She replies that it brought her joy, that it was her gift to him celebrating their victory over the 2 armored boars, and that their blue adventurer tokens prove it. Mew says it's unfair because she's the only one without a blue token. Toru tells her not to worry because she can get F rank very quickly. After all, Mew is the strongest among them. Most smiles and says it is true. Ural says it is a pity his promotion to E rank was delayed, since he defeated the hobgoblin chief even though the dungeon itself was not conquered. Toru says it's unfortunate, he missed the chance to get a skill to conquer a dungeon, but he's glad he didn't stand out too much. He says he stopped the monsters from invading the city and received gold for it. The skin from the armored boars can be used to make new equipment, and he feels he is making steady progress. Uro smiles as Toru says he wants to ask her something, and she asks what it is. Toru says that if it's okay with her, she would like to join their squad, and Sarah and Mu immediately become happy. Yarel turns back and thanks him for the invitation, but says an old woman like her will only delay them. Toru asks if she has another problem. She twitches immediately. He takes her hand, says he might be able to help, and asks to take a look. Seeing all her memories, he concludes that even after reviewing her entire personal history, he finds no particular problems. At the roots of her tree, he sees a strange black hole and wonders what it is. This growth hindrance prevents its owner from gaining skill points and suppresses magical growth. Uro says it turns out Toru can see skills without using a measuring device. Her face goes sad, and she says she had to quit being an adventurer because of that cursed fruit. She recalls when the temple head came to their village. The villagers could not understand why he would come to such a godforsaken place. Someone says the girl said she wants to meet Eurolirial. The others are stunned and call her a damned witch. Someone quiets her, saying she should not say such things so casually. At Ural's house, she asks again whether the temple head truly wants her to be a teacher. The head confirms it, and Ural thanks her for coming so far. She refuses the offer. The temple leader points out that someone like her, once a hero candidate, left the adventurers and asks whether it was because of the mage killer. She remains silent. The temple master says that usually when you defeat the dungeon lord and seal the black hole on the skill tree, trunk a new fruit appears, but one labyrinth contains a skill that curses magic users. She says it's just a rumor. Whether she was kicked out of the party or just tired of adventuring, it doesn't matter why she quit. Calling her White Ice, she asks Uriel to share her great knowledge with him. Uriel says she became a teacher at the discretion of the head of the temple. She became someone who passed her dreams on to the younger generation to help them grow, and Toru says he understands now. Toru says he checked the curse's effect, and the description says it cuts skill points gained from defeating monsters by tenfold and slowly reduces the magic reserve that would otherwise grow over the years. In his panic, he used her full magic to search through time and bring her back, and she recovered at that exact moment, and Sarah asks whether he can use his skill to get rid of it. Toru explains that on a skill tree branch, he can use recovery as often as he wants, but when the recovery time reversal effect is active, the skill fruit cannot be removed from the trunk. Sarah asks to take a look, and Uriel tells her to try. Sarah asks Mew for help, but Mew says she's too full to move. Sarah warns her that if she falls apart after eating, she'll turn into a fat cat. They settle beside Uriel. Mew takes her hands and says they are starting. A moment later, all 4 of them are in front of Yuri's treat. Uriel says it feels strange to see the tree so clearly. Sarah asks whether it seems amazing. Mu brags that it's all thanks to her. Sarah says they're busy now and will put it off until later, stroking the swirl of hair on her head. Sarah walks up to the fetus and closes her eyes, while the others start to panic and ask what he'll do. After Sarah acts, the fruit suddenly glows. Growth acceleration is a skill that speeds up a user's skill point gains and magic growth. Toru starts to realize Sarah simply reversed the curse with her skill. Sarah says she just thought it might work. She asks Toru how she feels. Earl doesn't answer her, and a second later the mistress throws herself into her arms, tears in her eyes. Sarah smiles and returns the hug. Toru takes Uriel's hand and pulls. Suddenly someone between them cries out that she can't breathe. Mew sat on Sarah's lap, while Uriel wrapped her in a tight hug, and they kept hugging as Toru sat beside them smiling. As they approach the Adventurers Guild, Sarah says it's unusually empty today. Toru says that's all because the plan to retake Basalia is finished for now, and the high-ranking adventurers have returned to their hunting grounds. Sarah says she and Mu will go get ready. Mu says they'll be back soon, and Toru tells them not to overdo it there. Thor tells Ural everything is fine, and they should go too. Ural says she's counting on him to show her around here. The place is mostly empty, but someone is still very loud, so Toru tells Ural to go to another stand. Toru asks the worker with 2 ponytails if she can register a new adventurer, and the worker absent-mindedly agrees. Seeing Uriel, she immediately blushes and stammers, hesitantly greets them, says they are accepting registration applications, gives her name as Marika, and asks to know their name. Uriel introduces herself and says it's a pleasure to meet her. Marika hands her a paper and asks her to fill out the registration form. Mrs. Uriel laughs and says how nice it is to see the letters clearly. Toru asks the worker for the introducer's token needed to register a new adventurer and shows his token so the worker can see it. Marika reads the paper aloud, says she is 22 and from Stola, then smiles and adds that she now understands where those years come from and sees no problems. Uriel's real name is Jura Lerl, but they forced her to register as their granddaughter and shortened her name to Jura. Marika puts the ball down and asks if she may touch it now. Uriel reaches out and touches the ball. Toru is amazed once again by Uriel's skill tree. Even the 3 lower branches, ice cream, ice crystals, and snow cover, are fully grown with skill fruits hanging from every top branch. Iceflower Camp, a mid-level skill tree, has fully grown and Freezing Mist has very little left. All skill trees cap at level 9, and while they may not all grow, she already has 4 of them. Marika says she's simply incredible. She thinks carefully about what rank to give her. After thinking, she happily announces she will be given rank B. Toru grew indignant and said all newbies should start at G rank, and Marika grew angry, demanding to know what he wanted as he kept butting into their conversation and could not stop. Toru replies awkwardly that it's not like that, and he's just checking whether the system has changed, because he thinks it would be a problem if she got such a high rank. When adventurers are more than 2 ranks apart, they cannot form a party, and their available hunting grounds are limited. Toru scans the room and spots the worker who always serves them, so he tells Marika to wait and pause the procedure to confirm something, and Marika gets angry, saying she works here too and asking why he stopped her. Uro calms her gently, apologizes politely, and asks her to wait a moment. Marika immediately relaxes and smiles, saying she will wait as long as she needs. He adds a condition, asking Uriel to let her touch her hair, and she blushes as she looks at him. A quarrel breaks out at another counter, as a customer demands the worker tell him the modest gentleman hero's name, and she replies that, as she said before, she cannot reveal it at his personal request. The visitor presses on and asks if she can use just his initials, and she says even the initials could identify him, so she cannot. The visitor is a woman and says they will not achieve anything this way. After a moment's thought, she asks again. She asks the worker what they can do about her age, saying she has already given up a lot. Then she starts to say that's not much either. The visitor interrupts angrily and demands to know if they can't even tell her age. Toru approaches them, says he's 39 now, asks if their conversation is over, turns to Anna to ask if she has a minute, and Anna asks if something happened. Toby says he came to register a friend, but it seems she will receive a higher rank. Anna asks whether they have already been evaluated using the only measuring device. Toby replies that they have. Anna says that if that's the case, she's very sorry, but her rank can't be changed because the registration system was updated and made more efficient, and depending on how the skill tree develops, you can earn a higher rank. Toru berates himself for being careless, since after using the measuring device, he can't restore the hostess's skill tree. A different uniformed man steps in and apologizes, saying Toru wants to form a squad with the woman he brought, who is Shika, the head of the support squad. Toru says that's basically what he wants, and adds it would be good if they could lower her rank a bit. Shika says they can't change their mind much, and the most they can do is give her a C rank. Toru figures that if that happens they'll need at least an E rank to form a squad. Shika smiles and says that if his squad gets promoted there won't be any problems. The Goblin Cave, which is the Ranky promotion test, hasn't been conquered by any squad, so they can give priority to the squad that discovered it if they want, and he asks Toru what she thinks. The Goblin Cave that sparked the invasion remains unconquered even though the monsters were defeated, and several days have passed since the victory over the Labyrinth Lord, so the Hobgoblin leader should already have been reborn. Toru tells him he understands, and that they will do so, and the girl who demanded information about Toru from Ina asks whether he is the mysterious hero, says he is older than she expected, and wonders if he is trying to prove himself before retiring. Toru asks for her forgiveness and admits he lied, and she is surprised and asks whether it really happened. A man behind her says it's probably a lie, and the girl, confused and angry, asks whether it is. She says she was only curious to see what a man who had given up a chance at fame looked like, and Toru tells her that's the end of their business then. The girl catches up to him and tells him to wait because she hasn't finished talking to him, and Toru turns around and asks if she really has anything else to say. Shouting that she heard he plans to try to conquer the dungeon, she challenges him to a contest to see who can defeat the dungeon lord first. The man behind her says the dungeon looks small, so only one person can enter at a time, and she hesitates, uncomfortable. She then tells Toru she will let him go there first, and Toru relaxes with a smile and says he owes her. The man behind her says that if she does that a third party could win, and they have no right to challenge the dungeon because they haven't finished registering yet. Still upset, the girl follows Toru, shouting after him and pointing at him with her index finger to warn him to stay on his guard. Mu approaches Thor and asks if he wants a bath. The girl blushes with surprise when she sees the child and wonders whether he is married. Sarah steps in front of her, bows her head, and confirms the guess by saying she is his beloved wife. Confused, the girl says they're lying because she never heard he had a wife and child. The man tells her to calm down, assuming she is one of Mr. Toru's acquaintances. Sarah greets them, says she and Toru are in the same squad, then introduces Mu. Mu asks whether she would like to join them in the bath and whether Mu should wash her back. Bettina introduces herself, and behind him stands her butler Godin. Godin says it is nice to meet them, and Toru says, disappointed, that although he did not want to meet them. Mu says she wouldn't mind getting along if Godin wants. Godin sits down, thanks her and holds out a piece of candy, asking her to accept it as a token of their meeting. She immediately puts the candy in her mouth and says it's honey and delicious. Sarah and Thor also offered candy. Bettina laughs and tells her to keep sucking her until their next meeting, then apologizes, says she must leave, and calls Gudon to follow. They run off and Toru wonders why she suddenly acted that way. At the same time, Marika combs Ural's hair. She says the arrival of this box is simply superb, and that Ural's hair is incredibly silky. Ural says it's a bit pricey, but recommends it for its incredible softness. Shika approaches them carrying a tray and apologizes to Ural for the wait, then hands her the tray with an adventurer's token on it. Ural thanks them. Sarah says the black frame looks beautiful and mature. Mu says Grandma has become an adventurer like Mu. Toru apologizes for making her wait because he was the one who invited her. Ural tells him not to worry and says it wasn't his fault. Mershika screams that she can't believe Ms. Ural didn't get a B rank. She could tell her to get back to work right away. Toru promises they will conquer the Goblin Cave and catch up with her soon, asking her to wait a little. She nods and says she is much more patient than he thinks, so she will wait. With a smile, Sarah says everything will likely be ready in no time. Mu adds that if she takes the job, everything will go smoothly. The day after registering with the guild, Toru and his party went to the Goblin Cave. To reach rank E, they have 15 days to defeat the Hobgoblin chieftain deep in the cave and capture it. This will be difficult because the dungeon's walls contain certain minerals. Because of this, anyone exploring a goblin cave is accompanied by miners, and squads are assigned to ensure their safety. The Goblin Cave has only about 3 underground levels, but the constant flow of miasma makes any defeated hobgoblin respawn within a couple of hours. So the miners can work only during safe hours. They arrive at the Goblin Cave. Sarah asks Toru whether it would be faster to explore the cave while they dig, and he says fighting is forbidden during crystal mining because it could attract the miners. Forced to move forward, they alternate between fighting monsters and mining minerals. Toru tells the miners they will explore the first level and should get ready. A miner wonders whether they'll be safe with the squad that includes the child. Another replies that since the Adventurers Guild gave them permission, they can only wait. They move through a dark, narrow cave. Sarah tells Thor it's so dark she can't see and wants to turn on the lantern, but Thor warns her not to because she will become a target for the hobgoblins. Sarah says at this pace she can't even see where she's going. Running into something, she makes a noise. Toro remembers and says she's using Moo's eyes because they see well in the dark, and Moo replies confidently to leave it to her before using her ability. As the view opens, Sarah is amazed, says they can see even in complete darkness, and calls Mew incredible. A rock suddenly flies toward them, and Toru blocks it with his sword. He says they showed up quickly, then looks more closely, hears sounds, and tells the girls to follow him while keeping their distance. Stepping forward, he deflects the rocks repeatedly. Two monsters leap at him to attack. Toru severs both their heads with one swing of his sword. Then when a goblin throws a rock, he defends by placing a dead goblin's body between them, walking forward with the body and driving his sword through the goblin. Right now the miners are drinking. One says they will be away for a long time and offers the others a snack. The second laughs and agrees. Toru and the girls suddenly step out of the cave. The miner asks if they have already given up and come back. Toru says they are done, which surprises the others. Toru tells the miners they can leave now that they've cleared the first level. The miners don't believe him and ask if it's true since it hasn't even been an hour. Toru holds up a handful of severed goblin ears, and the miners stand in shock with their mouths hanging open. The miner asks if it's safe now. Toru says it is and that there shouldn't be any left there. Smiling, Sarah says they did a great job cleaning everything up, and Mew adds that she worked hard, so it's safe now. The head miner tells the others to get up and stop being lazy because it's time to work, and another one objects that he was just talking about a snack a moment ago. They enter the cave together. Sarah notices Toru's sword and asks whether his sword belt is sagging. Toru says that after all he is quite old. Sarah asks whether he is unable to restore it. Toru explains his restoration doesn't work on items not meant for combat. It only restores weapons and armor that take direct hits. She says she understands now. Toru approves and suggests clearing the area of monsters while the miners dig. He sees Mew handling rocks with the miners. Toru asks what she's doing while the miners take a break. Sarah says Mew thinks stacking rocks is fun and has completely opened up to them. Toru calls Mew into the cave, and she tells him she's tired of repeating the same thing. Once the miners realized that Toru's squad, despite how they looked, was actually very skilled, more miners arrived each day. A few days later, the number of miners increased to 20, and a new squad was added to guard the camp near the cave against monster attacks. Here are Shisen and his group. Shisen thanks Toru for his hard work. Rikaru tells everyone to take care of each other, and his Soku and Alesha say hello, saying it's been a while since they last saw each other. Sarah is happy and says they haven't seen each other in a long time. Toru says he heard they will also guard them on the way home. Shisen says it's all thanks to Thor. Rickard asks whether he suddenly became much braver or simply stopped being afraid of everything. Hisoku tells Rickard that until recently he could only swing his sword wildly, but now he has even learned to retreat. Rickard says that even Hisoku can shoot a bow without posing. Alesha says her burden as a healer has lightened, so she can relax and watch the battle. Toru simply smiles at their statements. Alesha remembers and says they would like to ask Toru something. Toru immediately thinks of mining ore and says he doesn't mind since they gave up the mining rights this time. Everyone is happy, Mew too. Toru stops her and says they are not hers. Mew says irritably that she wants to dig too. Toru asks her if she has always liked the whole thing so much. She says playing with rocks is fun, and hitting a pile of rocks makes it fall apart. Toru agrees, saying that once they finish clearing out the goblins, he will help her too, and that Mu should be patient, and she replies that she understands him and promises. After 5 days in the cave, they've collected enough ore. One miner says they'll soon finish the first level, and that it's been a long time since they made progress this fast. To be honest, they didn't expect anything special at first. The miner says Sarah and Mew are so cute that anyone would be fooled. Another person agrees, saying he is absolutely right. Sarah blushes and Mew is happy. Gather asks Toru whether they should try for the second level tomorrow and whether it is all right to rush, and Toru replies that they have more or less cleared the first level, so they will wait and see. The miner says it's good they work quickly, but he doesn't want them to overwork themselves. The loggers explained how they saved them, and he apologizes for doubting them. Toru exhales and says not to worry, he's already used to it. There are 10 days left until the deadline. Only a few days remain to clear the goblin cave. Ramo is glad to see them and says they returned and finished quickly. Toru immediately apologizes for rushing. The girls greet Ramo as well. Ramo asks Toru if he is doing well. He then asks if everyone wants to try on the new clothes. They all change. Sarah asks if it suits her, and Toru nods silently. Remo says if the suit is too tight at the shoulders or under the arms, she can use the chest drawstring to adjust it to her body, and Sarah looks and asks if that's what he means. Pointing to the hat, Mew asks what it is, and he replies that it is a hat made of red hippopotamus skin. Mew is surprised. Ramo asks if she likes it and how she feels. She says she feels a little strange but likes it. Mew immediately runs to show Sarah and Thor. Sarah touches her elbow and says it feels strange, soft to the touch but hard when you grab it. Ramos explains they are made from the hump of an armored bear and layered to create that effect. Romo looks at them lovingly and says he wishes he had a wife and children. Toru tells him he is not yet 30, so he still has plenty of time. Ramos smiles and says he is right, because if even he, who has just turned 40, could get such a nice wife and daughter, it is definitely too early for him to give up. They look at Toru, and Sarah says his robe is beautiful anyway, while Mew says he's all shiny. Romo explains this robe comes from a blue-striped serpent that lives in the fetid swamps. Living in miasma-soaked waters makes its skin especially durable. Chiru says it means the material is high-grade and worth 20 silver coins. Sarah asks if it is right for him to take something so expensive. Ramos smiles and winks, saying he was recently asked to repair a snakeskin cloak, and Toru says they used the repair as an excuse to cut off some material for themselves, and then made this robe from it. Rommel asks how things are going with the cave, and says being rushed shows they are going through hard times. Chiru says nothing can be hidden from him, and it is a race against time. Ramo tells him there is a tradition of not killing the Lord until enough war has been mined. Toru thinks about Euro and wishes they had a bit more help. Ramos says the miners are becoming a burden instead of helping. Toru suddenly remembers something, tells Ramo to wait and says they'll succeed, moves his hands over the bag and thanks him. Ramos says it's a pouch he made to celebrate her promotion and wonders if she's actually using it. He suggests they take a look inside. He spots the magic stones and asks where she got them. Mew says they are food for Ohanamaru. Ramo admits he doesn't understand and asks for an explanation. Sarah explains this is Mew's favorite sled, named for its flower-like design, and its magic stones let it fly. Ramo is surprised and realizes that's what she meant by food. Sarah says Toru was angry with Mew because Mew rides them too much. Mew says sadly that Toru was angry. Smiling, Sarah tells Rama that if she works hard on the adventures now, she can get the magic stones. Mew adds that this is called a salary. Rama pats move on his head. Torai tells him they are leaving. He sees them off, waving as they go. Sarah turns back and asks him to do something for her. Sarah approaches and whispers in his ear. Ramos says it would only take him a couple of days to do that. Sarah begs him to do it for her. Ramos smiles, and Sarah steps back. Deep in the goblin cave on the second underground level, they continue clearing it out. Mew strikes with lightning, while Toru repeatedly blocks attacks with rocks. He charges the goblins and decapitates them, then notices one blow is a bullet of decay. As expected, starting at the second level, hobgoblin shamans appear and work better together, and he easily kills one shaman. Sarah asks what the spell is, and Mew joins in, telling her it's like a monster skill that will do the same thing to him if you touch it. Mew takes Saru's gun, touches the smoke, and says it's fun as the gun starts melting. Sarah takes it and asks Toru if he is okay, if that strange thing affected him. Toru tells him to look at his cloak, saying something like that means nothing to the skin of a snake from a poisonous swamp. Apologizing, Sarah says she should have stopped him. Toru tells her not to push herself so hard, saying using the invocation on flying objects is very difficult and the mantle was made for that. After a moment, Sarah asks Toru if she can try something. Toru is surprised at first and then smiles. Raising her weapon, she casts evocation on his cloak. Toru tries to cut the material with his knife and says it has become stronger. He wonders if the skill reversed the decable that lowered her defense. Sarah asks how to deal with that, since he can still use it. Toru asks what else he can keep using. This will be the key to defeating the Labyrinth Lord. Sarah is happy with these words, and Mew asks what the other key is and whether it is tasty at all. They emerge from the cave to find the miners worried and asking if everything is okay. He trusts them, and Toru assures the miners they will not cause any trouble and will stop them all so the miners do not have to worry. The miner says he understands and will then use his authority to allow them to proceed, noting it will benefit them to act faster and that he is surprised they came up with such a plan. Toru replies that an adventurer's life makes such cunning a man's honor and asks them to come in 30 minutes. The miner asks if they just have to reach the end of the first level, and Toru says that will be enough to make the hobgoblin react. Toru asks Season whether he can count on him if something happens. His group confidently replies that they can rely on them. They enter the cave, and Rikura wonders if the old man will be all right. Hisoku asks him if he is worried. Rikaru asks if it would be crazy to use the fact that the monsters are huddled together in front of many people to draw the goblins' attention on the second level. The ants say it won't take long and will make life easier for the old miner, but it means they'll have to fight everything at once. Hisoku laughs while Rikaru snaps at him, asking what he's doing, and Hisoku says it's ridiculous to think a selfish person like him would start worrying about someone else. 30 minutes later, Shisen calls out that it's time and they're leaving. Ricardo says he's ready and determined. Hisoku says he probably won't have to do anything. Alessia asks them to stop talking because she can't concentrate. After a while, the miners shout that they're coming in too. Inside the cave, Toru says the first level is clear now. Sarah asks Mu if she can take a look. Mu shows the rocks and points out how high she stacked them, and Toru says that's great, but wants to know where the other monsters are now. Mu asks if it can wait because she is very worried about those rocks right now. Toru replies sternly that he wants to know now. Mu obeys and activates her ability, spots numerous goblins, and immediately reports there are many of them. Toru says that's great and that it seems to have worked. She tells Sarah they must hold out. Sarah tells him to leave it to her and that she'll have his back. Toru asks Mu where the nearest ones are. Mu points in a direction. The goblins tense and Toru easily decapitates them all. Toru and Shisen meet in the passage between the first and second levels. Rikaru says it seems they handled everything and left nothing for them. Hisoku says he knew he wasn't joking. The miner says only the three of them did it, that he's been doing this for years, but he's never seen anything like it. The ordeal lasted more than a week, and by the final day, the miner's leader was speechless. On the final day of conquering the Goblin Cave, Benietta arrives with Godin and says today is the last day, that he achieved the goal of taking the cave and calls him Mr. Ordinary Hero, and Toru asks whether they really dropped everything to come see them. Bettina says that since they are rivals, it makes sense to watch the enemy's movements. Godin says they did nothing to deserve being called rivals and admires that way of thinking, and the girl irritably asks why he is laughing at her. Betchiana tells Sarah to call her Betty, praises Sarah's shirt as surprisingly good quality, and asks Sarah to show her the shop where she bought it next time. Sinra offers to show her the shop and says it is simply wonderful. Sarah even suggests she and Betty go there together. Betty leans in and says Mu seems energetic too, but is as small as ever. Mu punches her, leaving Betty speechless. Betty asks why she's being hit. Mu says if they're rivals, she doesn't want to be friends with Betty. Godin bends down, pulls out the candy, praises her wonderful character, and asks for permission to give it to her as a reward. Mu says Godin is a good guy and can become her servant if he wants. Godin says the idea is great and asks if they can start by discussing the salary. Mu opens his bag of stones and asks if this is what he meant, and Godin says how remarkable the stones are. Godin says that no matter how much it pains him, he is a loyal servant to her Lady Betty, and she wonders why she hired someone like that. Toru says it's time to end this. They are heading to the last level, and they say goodbye as they leave. Betty urges him to try hard there, and Sisson says he believes they can do it and asks them not to overdo it. Betty says she believes they won't lose, so they should try. Godin says those are incredibly kind words. If they conquer the dungeon, it will mean they've lost. Betty smiles and tells Godin it only means they will have to challenge them again. Having cleared the familiar first and second levels and replenished their skill uses, Toru and his squad moved on to the third. They step into a strange, vast place. Toru says apparently the third level consists of only this room. Mune spots movement, points and says someone is there. The hobgoblin leader stands wielding a huge bone. While Ural prepares dinner, the cat meows and she sets a plate of meat out for them, saying this is all they will get until Thoru and the girls return. The goblin leader exhales a furious, poisonous breath. Toru tells everyone to start and then tells Mew privately that he is counting on her. Mew immediately uses both the Thunder Needle and the Electric Spike. He gets this power. It's good to see she has used both Thunder Force and Electric Spike without changing her skill tree in the last 15 days. Toru notices Sarah's excitement and tells her she doesn't need to be so tense. Sarah says she's just bursting with enthusiasm. Toru readies his attack and swings his sword. The leader begins to roar. Toru immediately charges the leader as it tries to strike him. In a split second, Toru dodges the blow, rips the weapon from the monster's hand, and the monster screams in pain. Toru strikes again immediately, grazing his mouth and drawing blood. Toru slips to a new position and strikes his neck without hesitation, wondering if he was always this slow. After a while, all the monster's wounds healed and the blood stopped flowing. In the background, the girl shouted at him to try harder, and Toru smiled at them. At that moment, the monster moves in behind Toru. Toru sees it and dodges the attack. Toru's weapon brushes the monster's cloak, and he sends an electric shock into it. Toru thinks to himself that it worked, and using the hobgoblin's decay bullet effect and casting Sarah's appeal a few times was worth it. The effect lasts only a few minutes, but it's tougher than dragon skin. Raising his sword has the same effect. The monster growls in rage and attacks him again, but Toru decapitates it first, then lands several more blows, leaving it almost without limbs. The black hole in the center of the cave suddenly turned into ordinary ground, and Toru, who had heard it would vanish the moment the Lord of the Labyrinth died, watched it happen for the first time. The girls run to Thor, telling him he was so cool and that it was wonderful, even though Muth thought he would lose. After the hug, Toru says they're not finished yet, because as the reward for beating the labyrinth, he should get a skill fruit. Touching the ground activates accelerated healing, causing any damage or abnormalities in the owner's body to heal faster. Toru finds it odd since he already has recovery, but figures it could help heal minor wounds. Toru tells Mew and Sarah it is great and asks them to touch it. Mew touches it, and Toru sees it increase the wearer's physical strength. Toru says Mew's new skill is pretty good, and Mew is happy, saying she can tell she's gotten stronger again. Being an adventurer isn't just fighting monsters. Most of the time you're on the move, so leg enhancements are a big help. Sarah also touches Toru and notes the anesthesia, which dulls the owner's pain if it goes over his pain threshold. Sarah asks how it works and whether it will ease the pain. Toru replies that if he remembers, it's the most commonly dropped skill here, and it's very good for a vanguard. Adventurers can stay conscious after injuries that would knock a normal person out because they usually gain the skill the first time they clear a dungeon. Toru has heard it does nothing for small scratches and only works once a wound gets bad enough. Sarah says she somehow feels she ended up with a useless skill, while New brags she got the perfect one for her. Toru says it's entirely up to her luck, and as far as he knows there's only one skill here that suits the vanguard, but none of them have it. Sarah notices something is wrong and asks whether this is the end for them, and Toru replies that a sudden ceiling collapse after the black hole vanishes would be dangerous, and that the dungeon disappears after about an hour. He then remembers and asks Sarah to check whether her skill appeal works. Pointing her weapon at the fruit, she says nothing good will come of it. Toru worries what he's doing could be seen as an attack and urges everyone to go back. Stepping onto the circular patch where the black hole had been, he feels the ground is unstable. It reminds him of the time with the stone slab. He says it's probably worth checking. He tells the girls to move back. Sarah steps aside and calls Mew to follow her. Then he touches the ground and uses recover. Everything shakes and Sarah screams. The leader's body parts begin to regenerate and he comes back to life. Sarah pushes Mew away instantly. The monster grabs her hair and drags her toward him. Toru shouts Sarah's name. He immediately remembers that everything is exactly as it was 9 years ago, then says everything is different now, and he is not alone. He orders Mew, who immediately fires the electric spike, electrocuting the monster and freeing Sarah. When the monster lunges at Sarah again, she uses the appeal to stop it, and a second later Toru cuts off its head. Toru asks Sarah if she is okay. Sarah says she is, and that it's all thanks to Toru. Mew says he arrived so quickly he caught her off guard. Sarah apologizes to Mew for pushing her. Suddenly, Sarah says when he pulled her hair it did not hurt that much, and she assumes it was because of the skill she learned. Toru says that's probably true, and Sarah replies that she was very lucky then. Mew notices another stone slab has appeared and tells Thor, who stands up, walks over, and places his hand on it again. He gains a physical enhancement skill like Mew, says his previous skill is still there, and he's gained a new one, observes that using recovery on the stone tablet seems to restore the entire labyrinth to its pre-subjugation state, and tells the girls to try touching it too. Sora received a healing boost. Sarah is happy for her and calls it great. Toru thinks he has 6 recovery uses left for today. It's likely impossible to restore everything to how it was just before the stone tablet appeared. To pull off the Labyrinth Lord resurrection trick, he had to sharpen the blade as much as possible. With the risk of encountering more goblins on the way back, they only had 2 tries left. Toru suggests they try, and Sarah asks whether he really intends to remove the stone slab. Chirruz volunteers to do it, asks Mew to use electric spike and thunder needle, and tells Sarah to stay close to Mew. On the 3rd try, Toru got pain relief, Mew healed faster, and Sora gained a physical boost. On the 4th attempt, Toru and Sora gained extra magic power, and Mew's pain eased. Toru says it's great and each of them has now gained 4 skills. he suggests they go back. Sarah asks Toru whether they need his ear as proof, and he says they do not because the dungeon's destruction is proof. Sarah says she understands and that, even though he is the master of the labyrinth, not one magic stone has fallen from it, and Mew tells him she is hungry. Toru says it's too early to relax because the dungeon isn't fully explored until they exit. Emerging from the cave, they meet people who start clapping loudly and move up to them. As they step out, the cave collapses behind them, filling the air with smoke and dust. At the evaluation desk, it tells Thor that he has returned safe and sound, and she asks how it went. Torai says they somehow managed it, and the 2-week time limit made it tough. Ina says it's a great job, then asks the miner if he has confirmed that the dungeon has been conquered, and he replies that he has confirmed the dungeon has completely disappeared and that these guys are real adventurers. Shaking his hand, the miner says it was a pleasure working with them and that he looks forward to watching them grow. Congratulate them again, give them the board with new tokens, and ask them to take their tokens. When they get home, Sarah sees your owl on the porch, shouting that she is its mistress. They walk through the city together. Yurili says she didn't take part in the conquest and asks if she can still come, and Faru reassures her she can, saying they called it a celebration for her promotion, but it's also a welcome party for her. Mew asks happily if there will be a feast. Sarah is happy too. Toru remains mysteriously silent and does not answer. They arrive at the place they chose. Sarah asks whether this is the place. They go inside and are immediately greeted warmly. Dan says they've finally arrived and have already started. Sako sits beside him and stays silent. Toru thanks them for the invitation, and Yuro apologizes for keeping them waiting. Deaden, blushing, says it's all right and asks them to sit here. Dan points to a chair and says Sarah can sit there. She says there is only one chair left because she is too small. Toru gestures to Mew's lap, but Sarah happily takes the spot and sits on his lap. He says it will be uncomfortable for him to eat. Toru calls Mew, and Mew tells Sarah that he did not tell her. Mew ends up sitting on Toru's knee, while a sad Sarah sits on the remaining chair. Dadon says they seem to be doing well. Mew asks him directly who he is because Mew does not know him. Toru tells her he visited them before and asked him to fix the wall. Sarah says his hair was shaggy last time. Toru says he used restoration to bring his hair back to how it was, and Daton laughs loudly. Dishes are served and someone suggests they start eating. Daton says it is on him today and tells them to take whatever they like. Everyone thanks him. Sako picks something pricey and suggests starting with it, but Deaden says he never said he could, so he shouldn't take the most expensive drinks and dishes. Sako tells him to stop being petty, calls him a former adventurer, then asks Urela about herself, and Urela admits only a little. Sako asks them to give her another portion. Ural asks Dan if everything is really okay, and Dan shouts emotionally to bring the barrel right away and take the beans too. Toru orders round potatoes and sausage. Dadan is annoyed that Toru always orders the same thing. Toru asks if they have regular drinks. The waiter replies they have orange juice, and Toru asks for 2 glasses. Toru tells Sarah she can order anything she wants, and Sarah says she wants meat, points to a dish and asks what it is, and the waiter answers that it is the foot of a large caterpillar. Sarah tries a bite and says it is very soft and delicious. Mew agrees and says the meatballs are very tasty. Mew asks Sarah if she wants to try some. Sarah asks what the dish is, and the waiter says it is lizard fat and cartilage, skewered, lightly fried, then stewed. Sarah tastes it and says it's delicious. The waiter thanks both of them. Mew agrees with Sarah as well. Sarah wonders how it tastes so good, and the waiter smiles, offers the plate, and asks her to try it. She sips the broth and, surprised, says it is delicious. The waiter asks if she knows that a little stewed meat is broth. Now Sarah understands this is the secret. She asks how he made the broth. He says it's a secret recipe and won't tell her, but the key is the cooking, and if she ruins the broth, she won't succeed. Repeating his words, Sarah looks at the hot broth while the waiter tells her that if she really wants to be good at something, she needs to know the basics well, and she thinks about it. A plate of potatoes and sausage is set in front of Toru. Moose says it looks delicious and reaches for it. Toru tells her to slow down. Toru warns her several times to put it back or it will burn, but she ignores the warning and puts the piece in her mouth anyway. A second later, her whole body starts burning. Tears stream from her eyes, and she screams and cries as Toru tells her he warned her. Mu runs up to your aisle and buries himself between her legs. She calls Thor stupid, and Thor says that's why she should listen to him. He rests his palm on her head. Even though he can use recovery, he shouldn't indulge her every whim. Yuro lifts Mu to her side and says she is hugging her. The Don calls it nostalgia and says his son used to be like that. Sako agrees and says he is like his daughter, a strong girl who does not listen to anyone. Toru says Mew has been acting more selfish lately. Dadun tells him to take care of what he has. He doesn't understand. Didn't asks what he should do and must make sure he shows her enough love. Didn't says that at times like these scolding won't help and he should be there when the child is upset. Toru asks what he should do then. Don says it's okay because selfishness is the other side of the motivational coin, so let her speak freely and take her time while you listen to what she has to say. Uriel says this is excellent advice. Dodon blushes as much as he can and says he feels young again when someone so beautiful tells him that. Sarah comes up with something and asks her to look at it. Mew tells her she is not here. Sarah points and tells her to look at Mr. Mew's chest. Mew opens her eyes and sees the badge. Screaming in a voice like Ohen Amaru, she asks if he likes flowers too, and Dodon says he's not sure but definitely doesn't hate them. Torum says this is no ordinary flower. The master got it by killing the labyrinth's boss while it slept on the lowest level. It is the comb left behind by the multi-headed snake. Mew calls Dadun Mr. Flower. Dadun says he doesn't quite understand what she means, but he's glad her mood is back to normal. Didun strokes her head and tells her she is a cheerful child. Sako says the flower grandfather is just right for her. Didun adds that he actually has a nickname too. Mew shouts that Sako has military eyes. Dodon laughs loudly and says the formidable Sako, known for his stern, serious fighting style, is spoiled. Sako says people who work hard have no time to sleep. Mew says it's hard and she also works, so she knows. Sako says it's because only those who can do it are able to. Moose says she can and that she works hard stacking the stones, and everyone laughs. Toru tells Sarah she was a great distraction, and Sarah tells him what she was thinking. She suddenly says she'll make a great broth. He awkwardly replies that he's not sure he understood her correctly, but wishes her luck. At the Adventurers Guild, Dutton points out that, as he suspected, the numbers don't match the calculations. Sako adds that this is especially true of the rain stones. Taro and the girls approach them. Mew calls out that they haven't seen him since last night, and Dedon asks whether they are really going to the new hunting grounds. Seeing Yarl, he blushes and says it suits her very well, and even Sako behind him is frozen in shock. Yarl says thanks, sir. Moo asks Mr. Flower to bend down. Dodon bends down and Moo grabs him by the beard. Dodon remains unmoved and keeps asking if Sako knows where the magic crystals are. According to Sako, no evidence was brought to their healing temple, and it was probably taken to another city and left there. Dodon says this means the wind user is involved. Mew is having fun, clinging to Dodon's beard while the other adventurers pass by, surprised. Mew suddenly lowers his beard and Sako catches it, saying his hand slipped and that he is holding it. Mew thanks him, calling him Sleepy Mister. The soldiers behind him freeze in shock, their mouths open. Someone tries to stop this, but Sako orders that it not be done. Dadun tells Sako he will wait for his report. Mew says they will see the flower mister. Dadun pats her on the head, promises they will see each other again, then leaves, patting Toru on the shoulder as he goes. Sako tells Toru that he has finally reached E rank, reminds him the non-interference period ends in 5 months, and asks whether that is enough time. Toru steps over and takes the move from his arms. Sikotl must be careful because the next hunting rounds will be harder to handle. Later, all 4 of them, including Yurli, ride off in a speeding cart. Mew is asleep on Uriel's lap. Uriel says Mew was very excited when they first left. Now she's sleeping soundly. Sarah tells Toru she is bored. Toru says he'll keep watch so they can sleep. The seats on top of the wagon are cheaper and offer a great view, but they must stay on guard because goblins might come from the forest. Sarah says she wants to talk to Toru, and he replies that as adventurers, they should rest whenever possible. Uriel tells Thor he can sleep too because her other leg is free. Thor first rests his head on her leg. He stands, thanks her, and says maybe next time. Sarah tells him he can sleep with her then. Toru thinks so, but says it would be better if she lay down next to him. Sarah is surprised by such a proposal. Uro watches them calmly and smiles. Red Sarah says she will wait until they are alone so no one disturbs them. According to Toru, without the nullification the subjugation would have been impossible, and Sarah was the only one who saw the whole fight, so she plans to raise her nullification to level 2 on this trip. Sarah says once more that she will make a wonderful broth. Yarl and Toru look at her lovingly. After a while they arrive at a house. Toru wakes Moo and tells her to get up. She immediately asks if it's time for breakfast. They step into a room where people sit at tables. Toru goes to the counter and asks if this is the reception. The worker confirms and assumes Toru is new. The worker greets them and says welcome to the River of Blood, adding that the adventure is killed. A worker introduces himself as Rishi of the Fukusui family and says he is responsible for instructions here. Toru thanks him and Ural introduces herself, saying she is pleased to meet her. Mew immediately asks her for 3 bowls of meat dango. Sarah introduces herself and tells Mew to calm down, saying this is not a store for her. Rishi will first explain how things work here. The return carriage leaves every day at 3 p.m., so he tells them to be careful not to miss it, and because weekends are crowded, he recommends booking tickets in advance. Toru says that 3 carriages passed while they were walking here and asks if they can board that train. Rishi replies that those carriages carry construction materials and usually have no room for passengers. Rishi says there are hunting grounds ahead and the Blood River has risen very high, so 10 adventurers come here. They usually assign each group to its own area to avoid unnecessary confusion. He hoped he had made that clear to them. To be more specific, he explains that upstream there are people in the red iron class who are equal to the white iron meant for use, and if they cross the large riverbed set aside for collection, they will see the hunting grounds downstream. To reach the other side, Torum uses that, but they must get past 10 huge hippos that live upstream. He'd heard the hunting grounds were very crowded these days, so some restrictions were in place, but that was a different story. Toru asks Rishi how work is divided here, and Rishi replies that it usually depends on the hunters and their enthusiasm, with those who show up during the day ending up among the best in the hunt. Toru asks whether hunters and adventurers really have many disagreements, and there are many vague hints of hostility between them. Rishi awkwardly admits that's not entirely true, and he wants to do something about it but lacks enough people. He assures them that if they need weapons or other equipment, he will provide it, and asks them not to be shy, but to speak up about anything they need. Rishi says that's all and asks if anyone has questions. Toru replies there are none and everything is fine. Rishi hands over the document and asks them to sign. Mew happily asks if she can, and Toru sternly says no because it needs his name. Moot suddenly grows sad. Toru remembers Dadan telling him to make sure he gives her enough love. Toru then pretends to ask if anyone knows how to spell his name and asks Mugen to write it because she seems much better at it. Mew cheerfully tells them to leave it to her. Ural and Sarah laugh quietly in the background. Mew proudly shows the paper, and Toru says she really wrote it. Rishi takes the document, says his name sounds familiar, and asks whether they have met him before. Chiru says he has lived in the ogre forest for a long time, so they probably didn't know each other. Rishi says he understands. Rishi warns Lady Ural that the Bloody River will last 2 days, so she should avoid being late for her carriage. Uro says they understand and thanks him for his help. Rishi stands awkwardly with flushed cheeks. They step outside and walk toward the river, moving points around while someone shouts, "Are they really lifting something? And if so, what is it?" Many people with bags are collecting something. Toru says it looks like they are searching for precious stones. He notes the sand here looks like it contains red iron. Sarah adds that the name fits their rank. Toru says the material from this hunting ground seems to be color-coded for rank. Ural says the river looks oddly frightening, and since she hasn't been to the North Mage, she's a little surprised. Mew says she is beautiful and has a lovely color. Sarah says swimming in the river is not worth the risk since they do not know what it might do to the body, and Toru agrees, warning they do not know what is in the water and telling them not to drink and to be careful. It is also highly resistant to corrosion. If you soak wood or iron, they will rot or rust in a few days. No ships cross this river, so it stays very quiet. They walk along the bank, pulling Mu on a sled. She sees tents and asks Toru about them. These are adventurers' tents where they can stay and rest, and people inside the tent notice them. One asks if this is the same man who was in the forest then. The second says he looks very much like him and seems to be the one who defeated Rusel and went to the temple. The other agrees, saying rumors claim he is very strong and can lay waste to a crowd of warriors, and it would be a shame to be defeated by such an old man. Onlookers notice Mew and say she is wearing red clothes. Many cannot believe they are not adventurers. Toru leads the girls to an empty spot and asks if they can stay, and everyone calmly gathers and gets ready. A man walks up and asks what they're doing here. Toru says they're not doing anything, they just stopped here to hunt. The man says the place is already occupied. Toru apologizes, saying he didn't realize it had already been taken because he hadn't seen anything. The man tells them to ask about any nearby tents, though almost all are empty. Toru says he just thought the place was very nice because it's next to the branch. The man then tells him to follow. After 10 minutes, they are all walking along the shore. Toru admits the tents here are very far apart. Approaching a tent, Toru asks a man if they can hunt here. The man does not answer and only points to a sign with a cross. Toru asks if that means it is not possible. The man says that if Toru wants to die, then go ahead. Toru asks him to explain. Smiling, the woman says it is dangerous to go there in the rain. Toru says it could be dangerous because of the heavy rainfall. Toru urges the girls to move on. Mu sleeps soundly on the sled. Sarah says they need to find somewhere to spend the night. Toru is choking badly. Toru looks around and sees Uriel not looking cheerful, so he asks if she's okay, and when she hesitantly says she is, he suggests taking a break. Out of breath, Uriel realizes she no longer has the physical strength she had 20 years ago. She would have liked to overcome difficulties easily and walk calmly through the thickets, but that will no longer be possible. The plants around it drain energy. This plant has been altered by miasma and absorbs energy from nearby organisms. Because of that, not a single living creature is here, and even simple plants will not grow since other living beings are afraid to come near. The man asks what happened. Toru says they decided to rest for a bit. He asks why they decided that so suddenly. Not waiting for an answer, he shouts he's had enough and tells them to leave immediately. Mew wakes up and asks what happened, and the man says again that he told them to leave. Thor awkwardly tells Uriel there is nothing to be done, hoping she'll object, then lifts her up and they move on. Blushing, Uriel apologizes for causing so much trouble. Toru smiles and tells her not to worry. Mew asks whether he will actually carry her in his arms, and Sarah says he will and admits she is a little jealous. Toru thinks about Saku's warning that the next hunting spot is far away, and as they pass a tent, he says there's nothing for them to do here, so they move on. They approach the tent and apologize in advance as they ask if the tent is free. The man looks at Uriel's body. Grinning, he says it is completely empty, and the people inside the tent are also smiling, but they look suspicious. A little farther from the tent, Sarah says it's great they finally found a free spot. They offer Toru the chance to stop here and unpack, and he asks them to help him. Mu goes off and says they will be back soon. Toru warns her not to go near the river. Everyone thanks Thor for her help. Thor says they need to get some good rest first. Toru hands her a folding chair. She sits and exhales. Uriel apologizes, saying she is no longer used to hikes like this and not as resilient as she once was. Toru says everything is fine, so let her rest. Sarah asks Toru for details and whether it needs to be placed here. Toru says he'll help with the tent and steps away for a while, and Uriel tells him not to worry about her. Surprised by their size, Mew collects the stones. Toru and Sarah hold the material's edges and use a stone to hammer a nail. Toru announces they're done, slaps Saru's hand, and says they did a great job. Sarah says she couldn't find a table, but she did find these coasters that instantly warm food and drinks. Your elderly relative carries a tray of hot tea and says the tea is ready, so allow them to drink it. Sarah sips hot tea, exhales, and says she feels great. Toru turns to Mew and asks her to sit for a moment. Mew calls back that she's already on her way and keeps building tall towers from stones. Grabbing another stone, she hits her tower, sending the stones flying away. She is actually enjoying it. Toru is confused and wonders whether this is fun. After a while, they move closer to the river. Toru tells them to stand still and says he will go ahead to see what is there, asking Mood to stand next to your eye for now while he checks the stones. They obey him. Sarah warns him to be careful, and Uriel says she understands him. Mu calls out that she loves him and hands him her electric spike. Stepping closer, he thinks he has seen it before but cannot remember, and he wonders what is on the other side of the river. Beneath his feet, the stones start to shift, and black frogs leap from the water. One lunges straight at Thor, and he steps back. 4 frogs move toward him. Uriel suspects the oxen's spirits are angry, so she must act. She casts a sleep spell, putting the animals into hibernation. Sarah says loudly that it's amazing. Mew says they won't lose. Uriel warns them to be quiet or the animals will wake. Toru smiles to himself and says this is exactly what he expected from Uriel. This spell normally affects only one enemy. Because it dissipates quickly and cannot target multiple enemies, a characteristic magic injection compensates so the effect does not weaken as it fades. Even after expending a large amount of magical energy, it is still difficult to reduce it because the magical powers are oversized. A universal spell, it spreads differently from others and produces a stronger effect. Toru fights monsters with his sword, but the frog's poisonous spines and slimy membrane make them untouchable and stop the blade, so killing them is very difficult. About to kill the last one, he is pleased they cannot move. An arrow flies at him, strikes his sword, is deflected and sticks in the ground, and Toru turns to see his neighbor. Teru pulls out his arrows and asks what he plans to do, then snidely asks if he means his arrow. Smiling, he apologizes for missing it and asks for it back, saying he believes there isn't even a scratch on it. Toru tells him to be more careful next time. The other man rudely says Toru talks too much and demands he give it back right away. Toru offers the arrow, the man takes it, but Toru doesn't let go, and the man's hand begins to tremble. Panicking, he tells him to drop the arrow, and his two comrades say the same, that he should let go now and they can deal with him quickly once given the command. In the background, Sarah yells for him not to get hurt while Mew urges him to try. Toru simply lets the arrow fly, and they respond angrily. Toru warns the girls that it is not safe here, so they should move to another spot. The three of them are still going strong. One points out they are heading that way. The archer pulls out an arrow, knocks it on his bow, and begins to aim. As Toru and the girls chat quietly, the bowstring snaps and hits the man in the face. Sarah turns around to see him kneeling in pain, and Toru, looking at his hand, tells him to be careful next time. Look closely and you can see blood flowing down the river. Uriel casts her spell on the frogs again. They suddenly fall asleep, and Thurper comes to them and finishes the job. Sarah and Mew stand behind them. Toru and his team took position on an empty riverbank downstream from where archers had surrounded them. As Toru swung his sword at the frog, a huge fish burst from the water and opened its mouth, sending a thick stream of strange, bubbling liquid toward him. Reacting instantly, Toru steps back, but the liquid still flies toward her. She lifts her cloak to her face to shield herself from the poison. Right then the fish sprays liquid at the girls. They panic, but Sarah uses her appeal just in time to redirect the poison downward. The liquid hits the frogs that are still alive, putting them to sleep, so they begin croaking one by one. The owl steps in again and casts a fog block that creates frost. Smoke surrounds her, and is then directed back at the frogs. Suddenly they freeze, alive and aware but unable to move. Their slight trembling makes this clear. Toru swings his sword, but the frogs start moving and head back to the river. Toru rushes to catch up with them, but the fish leaps from the water again and fires poison at them. Toru dodges, and Hela falls on his back, slamming into the ground and sending rocks flying. Toru stands up as the poison flies toward him, freezing in shock and unsure what to do, while Sarah uses her transformation to stop it, preventing it from penetrating and reflecting it back into the river. The frogs quickly jump into the river. Sarah shouts that they have escaped after all and tells the fish to stop bothering them. A pleased Move says they ran away because they were afraid of her. A disappointed Ural says maybe they should have frozen them more thoroughly. Sarah apologizes to Toru, saying that if she could have stopped them, they would never have come back. Toru smiles and tells her not to worry and that it's not her fault. Sarah is very sad about this, and at that moment Toru goes to one of the dead frogs and cuts out its tongue. When Mew asks if he cut out her tongue, he holds it up as proof of his defeat and warns Mew to be careful because it is poisonous. The knife has dulled from touching his tongue, cracks have formed, and it begins to melt before his eyes, but with restoration he easily returns it to its original form. Toru returns to the river, thinking that the farther downstream they were, the more room there would be to hunt. Toru says that as they relax and drink hot tea, the monsters seem only to be getting fewer, and the only one in a good mood is Mew, who is busy setting out the items. Toru points out that trying to do anything with this frog is troublesome. Ural sips his tea and says the atmosphere here is pleasant. Mew rushes up to Toru and hugs her around the neck. Toru still holds his cup of tea and tells her to be careful. Seeing this, Sarah gets up from her chair, leaves her cup of tea, and runs to hug him too. Uro says he sees himself as a good person. Sarah tells her that a short hug from Thor is enough to lift her spirits, as if all her problems disappear. Sarah asks Uro what about her. Ural pauses for a moment, then says she thinks this is a good way. Moving the chair closer to Thor, she hugs him on the side next to Mu. They settle into the calm and close their eyes. Mew suddenly says Toru looks gloomy. She asks if something happened. Toru takes a sip of tea and tells her not to worry, saying all men have that expression. Mew says happily that it's probably because Mew is so cute, and Toru smiles in agreement, which makes Mew smile even wider and happier. They sit together hugging, and Toru asks if they should change their hunting grounds. Yrol opens her eyes and says everything here seems fine to her too. Sarah adds that because of these fish they do not even fit. Toru says he can handle their attacks, but he's afraid he'll wake them up again, and Sarah pulls away, saying that if that's going to happen, they should just put them back to sleep. Your eye will close as his eyes close again, and he will say that the creatures clinging to Thor are quite interesting. Looking at the river, she explains it is a powerful water-based magic with weaknesses, and using the same attack repeatedly on each will reduce the effect of their magic. Teru thinks for a moment and asks Avril if that causes resistance in monsters. Avril smiles and confirms it. Mu is excited and asks Toru if he wants her to go do it, and Toru says only if she learns to swim really well, while a worried Sarah tells Mu she needs more practice, and Mu replies that it's good and she will try. Lifting a cup of hot tea to his lips, Toru says they need to sit here and wait. All the girls are still sitting in his arms. Ural says she is not feeling well right now and thinks the best thing to do is rest. Mew asks Toru if dinner is ready yet. Toru lowers his head, looking annoyed. Sarah looks puzzled and asks him what's wrong. Toru turns his head and shouts how long they'll sit there staring at them. The man in the middle clicks his tongue and says he noticed them. The man at the side, indignant, says he told them not to stick their heads out too early. The other man says he was only wondering when they'd start, and the third smiles and says there is nothing he can do and that he has never seen such beauty. The first person repeats that he prefers modest, sweet girls. The third objects, saying charm and seriousness matter most. The first is puzzled and asks if beauty is subtle and understated. The third keeps arguing that something else is more important. They start to fight. Annoyed, Toru clenches his teeth. The man in the middle steps between them, apologizes to Toru for disturbing them and asks them to continue. Toru shouts at him to shut up, furious. They introduce themselves. One of the rural men is the eldest son, a responsible and reliable person. The middle son, Ninlas, 2 years younger than the eldest, always stands by his words. The youngest is Gugtav, 2 years older than the middle son, and he is very attentive compared to his brothers. The elders struck him on the head and demanded to know what he had said. They begin fighting among themselves again. Uriel asks if they want some tea, and Toru, angry, asks Uriel why she is inviting them. The brothers calm down immediately and say they'd be happy to drink tea, awkwardly scratching the back of their heads. They all end up sitting in a circle drinking tea. Toru begins to speak, and someone asks what he plans to say. Irritated, Toru asks what they are doing here. The middle one thinks a moment and asks why Toru is asking. The elder replies that he himself looked at the beautiful girls. The younger says it is not right and that he should have said he only wanted to check if it was him. The older man remembers something and begins to say they haven't been here before, so he offers to help them. In the background, Mew sits on Sarah's lap, unhappy that someone is drinking from her cup. Toru asks how long they've been hunting here. The middle one says it's been more than 2 years, and he's tired of looking at this terrible red water. Toru says they look like his neighbors, but he didn't see them on the way here, and the middle one replies that they were a little further down the river, where the bank is much wider. Toru asks about the prey, and the other replies that there is none at all, and that downstream it is all the same. Toru then asks why they don't go the other way. The middle one with a sad face says they can't go there because they have no money. He explains that people like them must pay a huge sum to get to that place. Toru asks for more details. He agrees and proposes dividing the Bloody River's spoils into 3 rough categories, with the upper reaches the most fertile, full of rampaging hippos, red-finned crabs, and other monsters that yield materials and points. As he said, it's popular, so getting there isn't easy. Next is the middle course, where they've already been. You'll see red pois and frogs there, and when it rains you may see others too. Chiru asks about the sign with the black cross we passed on the way here. He says that's what he meant. If they hunted there, they'd be in trouble. He describes the lower reaches where they are now. It's too far away, so you can catch fish there, but they mostly get in the way, making it the worst place to hunt. Toru says that's why so few people are here. Tatu says it's better to wait until the middle reaches open up instead of hunting here. He says there is more game there, but it's still not ideal for hunting because of heavy competition. Toru says that, if you think about it, they kicked him out just for standing there when Uriel got sick. He suggests they probably believed they were going to rob them. Toru asks why they would believe that. He says many pretend to pass by, then grab the prey and run off. He says they were nearly deceived, so neighbors would see them as the main threat, and that perception would be everywhere. Even if they hunt in the middle reaches, they'll still have to rise to get out of the river, and Toru asks again whether this is serious. He says this is true and that there is one faction. These factions take a share of the spoils, monopolizing profits based on which race they belong to. Toru asks if he is one of them. Someone replies that if he were, they would not be here anymore. His brother supports him. After a moment's thought, Toru asks how they can get to the upper reaches, sips his hot tea, and says it would take a lot of money. Toru smiles awkwardly and says this isn't something you can learn just by watching. The middle one says they can stand up for themselves, but if someone attacks them, they are unlikely to win. The elder adds with disappointment that they can't even use magic. The younger one says sadly he doesn't like fighting because it causes too much bleeding. Ural eases the tension by offering another cup of tea, and the middle one thanks her warmly. He says the tea tastes very good. The younger adds that he's nervous and his throat is dry because there are so many beautiful women around. Ural laughs flirtatiously, covers his mouth with a small fist, and thanks him. She brings hot tea, and Toro asks if they know who is in charge here. He sighs as he talks about it. The Red Thunder, Purple Eye, and Red Tail tribes have rich hunting grounds that hold nearly half of all the river hippos. Actually, they are one of the Purple Eyes, which is why they were invited here, but he considers the head of the Didrot tribe very unpleasant. Toru is indignant and asks why no one is speaking up about this. He replies that the rebels are rumored to have simply drowned in the river. Silence falls as Toru remembers Rishi's worried face from when Toru asked about the conflicts. Continuing his story, he says the people in black suits are now doing whatever they want, and they are from the adventurer's security department. Toru then asks what happens next. The brothers didn't understand him at all and asked what he meant. Toru asks whether they are going to continue this now. The man in the middle smiles and says Toru is no slouch and that they have a plan. The older bets they'd all drown in tears if they brought it to life, while the younger says he's not ready yet. The eldest awkwardly tells Toru to forget it, and Toru agrees. The middle brother says he can teach them some tricks but asks for a break first. He asks them whether their problem with the frogs is that the fish are in the way. Mew says it is, Sarah says it is hard to deal with, and he says it is very easy to solve. Sarah asks how they should drag the frogs away from the river, and he replies that the farther the frogs are from the shore, the less likely the fish will notice them or water bombs will hit them. Sarah says it's not that simple because frogs don't return to the river. She quickly gives in, and the brothers say it will be so easy they'll be shocked. They offer to demonstrate with a smile and a thumbs up.